Oh wow! I just watched it. I watched it when I came home from swimming earlier, and wow, I needed to lie down after.
Well, I saw it. I didn't rewatch it for this because I saw it about 2 months ago. Because I think I might have told you that this year was Twin Peaks year, so I went right
Yes,
back to the
yes.
beginning of series one, season one.
Oh,
89, 90, and my partner and I went through week to week to week every Wednesday. I just finished episode 18 last night of The Return, so I'm
wow.
done. And in between seasons 2 and The Return, we did Fire Walk with Me. But I mean, in all honesty, this film is burnt on my brain from being a teenager because
Wow.
it was my one of my go-to films, particularly in the middle
Yeah.
90s. So I thought I can do this without another.
Is it this one you didn't have to rewatch? Yeah.
Not really.
I actually came to this one kind of late on. I got it on DVD when I was at university, when I was in a massive, just a love affair with everything Lynch at that point. We were studying Blue Velvet on one of my courses, and from there it spiraled out into anything and everything Lynch. I knew of Twin Peaks, but I'd never actually watched it at that point. I'd seen it referenced many, many, many times, and Fire Walk with Me, but I'd never actually watched it. And I can tell you, when I got this, I saw this before I saw Twin Peaks.
That's interesting because my potted history with Twin Peaks is kind of unusual in that when it came over here, and I think we had it about 18 months after they had it in the States. I was really kind of too young to watch it, and but there was such a vibe about it.
Yeah.
It was an instant success. So you would hear adults talking about it all the time. You would hear adults in kitchens talking about, "Did you see that show last night?" And on it would go. And then I think I must have bothered my parents a lot to be allowed to see it. And I think so. I must have caught about, I don't know, maybe the fourth episode or something.
Right.
And I was able to see a few, but I was quite fascinated by it, but at the same time still too young.
Yes.
And then Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me was out on VHS, and obviously by that point we're talking 94ish, so a teen, very much a teen. And what made me seek it out was partly because I had some memories. It's so odd, isn't it? Just a couple of years is a yawning chasm when you're that age.
Yeah.
But I had these memories of a couple of episodes as a child, and because I knew it was a prequel, I thought, well, that's going to be sort of easy to pick up with because I didn't see the series from end to end. That was the theory.
Well.
But I picked it up and I watched it one night very late, and it was just so instant. It was tapping into something that was so exciting at that age. And then it sort of just became, as I say, it became one of my maybe half a dozen go-to films throughout my teenage years in the 90s. It was literally, I would be either watching Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me and listening to The Downward Spiral by Nine Inch Nails, or Outside by Bowie, or cladding myself in enough black, drawing occult symbols and going to goth clubs. I mean, it just absolutely worked for me.
Well, this is that film, isn't it? If you were that teen, this is your film.
So that teen. And so this just became, I think there was a point where I might have been watching it weekly. I was just so fascinated by it.
I think that would fry my brain, if I'm perfectly honest. It's an amazing film. I mean, I remember first seeing it and I couldn't tear myself away from it. I think I was supposed to be doing something else, very likely an essay or some coursework or something like that. And I couldn't leave it alone. It was the proverbial sore on the roof of the mouth,
Yeah.
And it horrified me in so many ways. Some of the imagery in it it really hurt to watch, and still hurts to watch to this day. I mean,
definitely. I mean, it's not an easy film by any stretch.
No.
I think what it probably did was it cracked a certain nut. I think up until that point, it's like a rite of passage for many kids. I'd sort of only known kind of one presentation of fiction, really.
Yeah.
And it was linear. It was exposition.
Logical.
It was logical. It's
Literal.
coherent.
Yeah.
And suddenly there was this thing that wasn't playing ball
Yeah.
in that respect. And then it was around the same time that that I was sort of discovering certain writers who were also not playing ball in the way that you are taught, you are trained, you're trained.
Right.
It's that sort of, I mean, if you want to put it in that kind of Apollonian or Dionysian thing, Lynch was Dionysian.
Yes.
Everything I've been taught was Apollonian.
Absolutely that. And it's amazing. It's a testament to the guy, isn't it, that he somehow managed to break through into an almost mainstream space.
Well, I've got a little theory, which is probably kind of a bleak theory, because I mean, one of the things about this film in its context is, I mean, it's nuts, because obviously Lynch made the series in '89, and it was lauded. It had these massive ratings. Then during season 2, he leaves it. It flounders midway through its second season. I'm of the view that the second season has a fantastic run of episodes at the beginning and a fantastic run of episodes at the end, and it sinks for about 8 episodes in the middle. And part of the reason is that people are trying to direct it like him, and and it's just it's not their style.
No.
So you get this interesting situation where he goes back and tries to save it. And he saves it I believe on an artistic level, but of course he can't save it for everyone, because many don't like that increasingly abstract, that increasingly morally ambiguous, that increasingly strange, unsavory direction that closes season 2 and then basically sets up Fire Walk with Me in the return, even though it's fucking brilliant. And
it's stunning. I mean, this is the real stuff, isn't it? That's the stuff he really wants to talk about underneath. Yeah.
But basically, the golden child is dead. Because everyone hates Twin Peaks by 1992. Yeah. And the interesting thing is that maybe they decided they always secretly hated it. But it was hard to get that opinion through all the hype, because but now it was now people, critics and various people, were comfortable in saying, wasn't it all a bit too knowing? Wasn't it all a bit too eccentric? Wasn't it all a bit too art school? And what does Lynch do? He makes a movie version. It's the ultimate. What the fuck are you even thinking? Yeah. And of course, it promptly crashes and burns. And it sort of brings me to the point that
I actually went back and read some of the reviews.
I mean, critically and commercially, it was an absolute disaster.
It's not just a flop. It's not just a flop. It's not that they didn't like it. They hated it.
It's visceral. But this is really what brings me to my point, because to me, it's how much, if you like, the arbiters of good taste try to gatekeep. This sort of narrow vision of culture, which is motivated, of course, by markets predominantly. Lynch is a fascinating figure to me, because he is the rebel who was foolishly let into the building, of course.
Yes.
So in some ways, he's an establishment rebel, and he becomes, I think, a very useful tool for the mainstream, because when the mainstream, and certainly throughout I'd say through his imperial phase, which is the 1990s. So when it wants to extend its parameters just a little, usually, and that is of course during periods of stagnation, box office doldrums, David Lynch was a useful kick in the ass. But when they needed someone to pillory for showcasing messy, dysfunctional, pretentious, indulgent art crap, he gets booed at Cannes. And I think that is always been his function. He's like almost like a kind of Vice character. They allowed him to character, right? They allowed him in. They allowed his singularly strange visions into the world of mainstream cinema in order to feed off it, in a very diluted way. Because obviously many of the things he did he changed the course of the flow of the river in the 90s. But of course, no one does it in quite this way. They just, they take bits. So you get something like The X-Files, which is a very diluted thing that could have come from the brain of David Lynch. You get other things that emerge, other kinds of films. You get things like Oliver Stone films, like Natural Born Killers, things like that. I would even say there's a lot of Tarantino that's in the 90s that's indebted to Lynch. But they take this kind of, to my mind, diluted version of it, So he's allowed to push culture on, but he's a fucking whipping boy whenever he does something that it's like, oh no, you've put a flag down where we do not want a flag put down.
Yeah. So he's allowed to do it within very particular parameters, right? Within the parameters where it's not going to be corrosive to the mainstream.
Exactly. And in 1992, no one wanted a Twin Peaks movie.
No, and even like when there was some hype for this, when the only people who were even marginally excited were people who had stuck with the series, and he deliberately, all four of them, right? But he deliberately said, "No, I'm not giving you that.
No,
I'm not giving you what you want." And because he doesn't do that, does he? That's not his way. In fact, if he knows there is a clamour for a very particular type of story, he will give you the opposite. It's that old. Who was it?
It's that strange thing. He does it, but he does it. He actually does give you the story, but he gives it to you in a way you can't possibly anticipate, and it does feel like the opposite, but
it almost
you
feels
actually
like...
get it. It's one of the things I realized last night, having seen episode 18 of The Return, and now pretty much finishing my run of Twin Peaks, unless of course there is further. And I thought it is all there.
Yes, it is. The information
but it is not there in
how
necessarily people wanted it.
Exactly that. It's not clear. It's not concise. It is not wrapping things up. It is not expositional in any way, and it's not literal. No, it's not literal storytelling. It's emotional storytelling.
Yeah, and of course he is one of a very few creative people, certainly in the visual arts, who can pull the very thing that he pulled today. More than 20, well, no, not more than 24, just shy of 24 hours of watching it. I was in the kitchen this evening cooking away, and I dropped the spatula into the frying pan. I went, oh fuck my god. And I'm on my own. There's me and the dog, part of the time, because suddenly my brain was relaxed, and I'm going to say this while Jack's not here because it's a spoiler for him, because I know he hasn't seen.
Yes, that is going to be one of the difficulties of the conversation tonight, by the way.
So I'm going to get this one here now. I suddenly remembered, because of Fire Walk with Me, the very end scene when Carrie or Laura and Dale go to the house. The person who answers calls herself Mrs. Tremont. It's the other name of Mrs. Chalfont.
Yes, that's right.
And it just dawned, I'd forgotten, and it dawned on me tonight. I was like, right, so who's she talking to? Is it the grandson with the mask? Or is it Sarah Palmer, who now we are sure contains Judy?
Yep.
And then I just had this absolute chill run through me, and I was like, oh fucking. Now what filmmaker does that to you nearly 24 hours after you've seen their picture? Because all these things start to percolate, all the cogs start ticking and clicking into place, and that happened all the way through The Return. I'd be a day, 2 days, a week down the line, and I suddenly go, shit. Yes. That's what that means.
This is what this means. This is what this refers to. It's what he does, isn't it? It's that very particular dreamlike logic that he establishes, where everything is symbolism. Everything operates on multiple various levels, and it gets to you in a way that literal storytelling doesn't. Literal storytelling tends to operate within the span of the pages of the run of the film. This gets inside of you. It gets inside of you, ironically, in the same way that the entities from the black and white lodges get inside their hosts, right?
Yeah. But one of the things I love about him, and it's why my love affair has been maintained, is that yes, he does these things that we can pin labels like abstract, surreal, non-linear to, and yet he is not an intellectual. He is engaged on a more visceral level of art. He insists on rationality as being quite down our list of priorities to interpret his work. And that's fantastic, because there's a tendency. I mean, he's not a remote cerebral filmmaker, and if he were, I think these projects would be far less interesting if they were just cryptic crosswords we have to solve. They're not cryptic crosswords we have to solve.
No,
they are operating
mistake.
on a much more potent emotional level. It's not without. It's not saying leave your intellect at home, but it is saying don't push your intellect above all the other things you can bring to bear on your experience, which again, it seems like the Dionysian thing, forget your training, forget all the structures, forget all the education you've had about how to deal with this kind of thing, and just give yourself up to it.
That's it. And also expand your parameters and assumptions of what you assume to be intellectual. It is engaging your intellect, but not what is generally considered to be the intellect, i.e. your ability to solve problems on a cognitive level. It's the visceral, it's the gut, isn't it? It's the soul. That's what he's going for. He really seems to understand that human beings operate primarily, if not almost exclusively, in an abstract space, right?
Yeah, he understands that we're deeply, deeply fractured as well.
Absolutely.
Deeply fragmented, hence duplicates and dream selves and doppelgangers, and people losing their memory, or coming back to a point, having forgotten how they made the point originally.
In this film, what got me this time watching it is the way these characters, they seem to be aware on some very fundamental but not articulate level that they are operating in a narrative or a mythology, and they can project forward through it. There is this awful sense of inevitability. You get characters like Laura Palmer, who seems to know almost from the first instance what is going to happen to her. She doesn't understand it in a particular way. She doesn't know that she's going to be murdered and then ascend to the White Lodge. She doesn't know that she's going to become one of these strange princes.
If indeed that's what happens, we can assume, but no, I agree, and I think there's something very much there locked into the idea of human beings are free, but not into the circumstances of their own making, and that we are intuitive if we allow ourselves. We do have these moments of uncanny foresight, and it's something that Jack alluded to in our private message, and he just hit upon something that I've always thought about Lynch, is that Lynch is the true realist. He is true realism.
Yes.
Because it is and one of the things that I loved about his films as a teenager, and which has kept me on board, is I find something in Lynch's way of making stories and making film that feels much closer to genuine experience than anything else, even though he's often labeled, he's a surrealist, or he's this, or he's that. Life is dysfunctional. We do feel fractured and compressed in our contemporary world, the kind of industrial nowness we're in. We look at the life that we're in, and the horrors and the craziness and the faith in ridiculous things like the invisible hand. It must be a dream. It can't be real.
Absolutely.
We can't be really doing this. And yet we have this intuition that we are. The chair I'm sat on is really here. The conversation we're having is really happening. And yet there's this other part of us that knows it can't possibly be. And what Lynch allows, I think, is for us to... it's dangerous, really, because what he allows us is the moment to disentangle ourselves from the illusion. And go, this is fucked up.
That's it. That's what makes it so dangerous. That's what makes it so dangerous. It's the fact that he pares away delusion. People call him a surrealist. They call him abstract. And I say, actually, he gets closer to a certain a fundamental human truth about our natures, about our abstract natures, our metaphysical natures, than any social realist tract you can think of. Because more often than not, don't get me wrong, I won't dismiss realism as an art form. There's a lot to be said for it, but very often, almost universally, very often, it is engaging in the delusion, isn't it? It's there to reinforce the delusion.
It's too neat. It's about structures, and it ends up propagandizing.
Yes, it ends up propagandizing. Ultimately,
because it says, well, this is the way things have to be. But, this is it, and it's the same forever. There is a status quo, and the great things about films like this is we don't even need to expand it to moments in history or we can just be almost very solipsistic about this and think only about ourselves. The amount of times you sit there and going, I don't know who I am.
Right.
I don't know what I am. I don't know how I must appear to other people. I don't know where is there continuity. Do I?
Yes.
Because we're bombarded with this stuff about, know yourself, be real. And you think, but I don't really. I think I do when I'm just going on in my everyday life. But actually, if I sit down and think about it for a moment, particularly if you're alone and you've got no human connection, you've got no interaction going on, you realize how much you explode, you unravel, you don't exist.
You are staggering on the edge of an existential abyss always.
Mm.
Always, always, always. And these notions of identity that we're conditioned to assume that we not only that we have, but that we must have, that we should have, that it must be absolute, that it must be concrete, that we must have some core of ourselves. It's bullshit. It's absolute, complete hogwash. No human being has that, and no human being has ever had that, because we, in and of ourselves, are not myths. We're something else. We're something far more protean. Lynch gets it. Lynch gets it. The way characters, it's not just the doppelgangers.
I mean,
it's the way characters transform.
Yeah. But we can't anchor ourselves down to anything. I mean, there I was just a moment ago talking to you about being a child or a teenager. I can't rely on any of that.
No,
I don't know how many times that's been re-edited.
Absolutely. And who is that person, right?
The lens.
If you could somehow contrive to meet that person, that former self, what would they be? Would you even understand them or have any identification with them? I'm not sure I would personally.
That's why the Philip Jeffries scene is so great. Who do you think that is there? I don't want to go into it too much because I'm sure Jack will have ideas. I think the Philip Jeffries scene, which is greatly
it's the Rosetta Stone, isn't it?
Yes, it's greatly whittled down from its original cut as well. But that scene is everything in abstract.
Yep.
Philip Jeffries is there to basically. He's struggling to tell you what's going on.
Tell the audience and you
get it all.
What's happening, right? And I love the fact that just as he's on the edge of doing it, he disappears. He's cut. He's edited, right?
He's cut from the whole thing. I mean, I think we're going to be able to go through an awful lot of this with Jack as well when he joins us from the Black Lodge. But it is incredible, and what the joy of it, and the joy of coming back to the whole universe of Twin Peaks this year, is because we are so bombarded with a certain way of looking at the world, and I realized that I hadn't watched a lot of David Lynch in recent years, and now and it did cross my mind. I thought, well, you're over 40 now. Maybe he is naked. Maybe he is the naked emperor. And I had that thought because that thought has been so strongly transmitted to me of a certain way to look at stories and a certain way to look at artists. And I sat down at the beginning of the year and I went, no, he's not. This man is more clothed than most people.
It's the other way around, isn't it? Like yourself, I tend to have absences from Lynch because I find him too much sometimes. I just can't. It's not I don't mean that in terms of the work. I mean in terms of my reaction to it. I find it too emotional. I find it too powerful. It knocks me on my ass, and I need to recover for a bit. So I tend to have breaks, but. Coming back to him this year, and in such an amazing way with the new Twin Peaks, and now with Fire Walk with Me again. No, it's the other way around. There is something. Ironically, there is a kind of nakedness to him, but it's nakedness in the sense of truth. He takes away the paint and the costumes and the varnish, and he gives you something fundamentally humanly true that resonates with you in a way that's very difficult to articulate.
And when you collect together, because he obviously takes those asides, like the Straight Story, for example.
Of course.
But if you take that run, which basically goes Blue Velvet, Wild at Heart, Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, Inland Empire.
Wow.
That is, I mean, it's all the same film. His subject matter across those 5 films does not change.
Nope.
His obsessions and anxieties do not change. The plots are pretty much the same, but they're vital. They are amongst the most vital films of the late part of the 20th and early 21st century. But I think that the fear I often have with Lynch is I think when people when you're really into kind of film circles, is that because he's the premier avant-garde filmmaker.
Yeah,
i.e.
yeah.
He's the popcorn cinema's idea of an avant-garde filmmaker.
Uh-huh.
His abilities get reduced
Yeah.
or trivialized,
Hmm.
but actually I really do think he is up there with the absolute greats. I mean,
Yeah. I mean,
you know,
you see the same thing happening in like with other popular artists, don't you? I mean, I mean, my go-to is always Clive Barker because, like, just the man, the one,
Yeah.
the reason I write, for God's sake,
I can get on board with that.
he is in a very similar position, isn't he? Because he is this ostensibly popular writer who operates in a fairly mainstream arena. There's a tendency to, certainly in academic circles, to almost like disavow his work.
Well, it's interesting as well that in this very film, the trajectories of David Lynch and David Bowie cross, because David Bowie is in the same thing. It's that, well, you're kind of a strange cult avant-garde guy, but you also make hits. How's that fucking possible?
How
and
is
it's
that?
the same.
How does it work?
So
I mean, Lynch, I have
their
no idea.
careers
I just don't know.
Intersecting is fascinating. Yeah, what
is
does Lynch do? Because actually, when Twin Peaks the series came out, and even though it is a little more ornamented than, well, a lot more ornamented than this, it was still a very strange thing to hear people just that I knew, their parents and family members, talking in such a rapt way about this thing that in a million years they shouldn't have liked.
Right.
So what happened there?
I don't know. Was it the packaging? Was it the way it was advertised? Was it just the fact that it was on like a prime time?
Because it was
slot,
crazy. I mean, I can still remember my neighbour's mother, who's obviously same age as my parents, and she would play the Julie Cruz songs, the Angelo Badalamenti music continually, because you'd hear it through the wall of a daytime, and she was obsessed with it. But she, in no other part of her life or her discourse, would you have said that woman's going to be a David Lynch? Right. He does things somehow. I don't know how he does it. Things that are seemingly willfully obscure, and yet they reach. They tap in, and they tap into unlikely recipients as much as
that
people who seek out the strange. And
that's not just a skill; that's a genius, isn't it? That is a sincere level of genius. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's probably also just a significant amount of luck involved as well, and just confluence and chance. He happened to produce and create this thing at the right time when culture was yearning and aching for it.
Well, I think there's something to be said for the fact that there is a certain character to a strain of the 90s which absolutely dovetails with how he operates. I mean, we were in the run-up to a millennium, so there's a symbolic weight to that.
Of course, right.
Things that idea of, I mean, darkness crept into an awful lot of the 90s.
Didn't it just?
Because it was the dark before the dawn.
Right, and this film is responding to that, isn't it? That's one of the things I think that people disliked about Fire Walk with Me, actually, initially, that it wasn't Twin Peaks. So it was, Twin Peaks itself, the first series, certainly, is softened somewhat.
They neither wanted Twin Peaks, but nor did they want something that was calling itself Twin Peaks. No, he was absolutely stymied, really.
He was going to be damned one way or the other, wasn't it?
I mean, it's amazing that really Wild at Heart and Lost Highway kind of put him back where he was, because this was potentially career ending. Oh,
it was. I mean, it was catastrophic in terms of the reception. It was absolutely catastrophic. I mean, people hated this film, and I mean, like, it was visceral. The hatred for this film was unbelievable, and it was all over the shop as well. It wasn't just critical circles; it was academic circles. They hated it. It was popular circles. The fans of Twin Peaks hated it. And it's amazing to think. I mean, I can
now
understand.
It is considered a work of real import.
Absolutely. I mean, the only people I can think of who were writing and operating at the time who got it were it's very niche people like Mark Kermode got it. Like Kim Newman, I believe, got it. But beyond that, no. No, it was low.
And it was interesting for me because I wasn't really at that point in my life tapping into things like criticism. I didn't read reviews when I was 15. I read music reviews, but I didn't. I didn't read reviews of films, and I didn't read reviews of books. Even though those are my
I
two
read
other
video
obsessions.
game reviews. That was
Yeah,
about it.
I would read music reviews. That was sort of about it. And but it was just, I don't know, it was that thing of, I felt like this was mine. I felt like this was this thing I'd discovered. So I didn't know it would have been panned and pilloried. I just knew that there was this VHS that I managed to get hold of. And it was mine, and I would introduce it to people kind of sparingly as well. And
I suppose contextually, it was just more difficult to know as well, wasn't it? Because of course you didn't have the internet, you didn't have social media, not everything was on blast all the time, so you didn't know everyone's opinions on everything all of the time.
I just remember thinking it was this age 15 or whatever I was, this most wonderful secret, which was enhanced massively by my mum catching me watch it during a particularly visceral scene.
No.
And she was like, what on earth? And it was odd because I can almost remember saying to my mum, oh, it's okay, it's the film version of Twin Peaks.
Yeah, it's art,
and
right?
Then
it's
suddenly she had like a blind spot. It's almost as if she couldn't remember what Twin Peaks was, and it had only been a few years before.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it was like, that thing that you were all crazy about,
that you all loved. That was
oh yeah, sure. Oh
Who
yeah,
Killed Laura Palmer,
yeah, donuts and damn fine coffee and all that.
Like, damn fine cherry pie.
It's gone. That's so
interesting.
curious, and she couldn't reconcile what I was watching to that.
Oh, how interesting. I mean, in a way, I can get that, the lack of reconciliation, because Fire Walk With Me, one of the things that Fire Walk With Me does, which I think is absolutely brilliant, is it establishes in the subtlest way possible that this is not the universe of the first season of Twin Peaks. It says it's a prequel, kind of is, kind of isn't. It's an alternate universe. This is a meaner universe, for one thing. It's a darker universe. And I love the fact that the film knows it's doing that. Like the opening chapter, if you like, where you have the other detective, the alternative to Coop, if you like, he actually has a mirrored experience of Coop coming to Twin Peaks, only it's tonally inverted.
Yeah.
So Coop comes to Twin Peaks and he's welcomed, and he's in love with it. Everything is beautiful and wonderful, and the police department.
Deer Park is the real horrifying doppelganger of Twin, because in Twin Peaks, goodness, if you like, let's be basic about it. Goodness is in the ascendance in Twin Peaks
at that point,
whereas in Deer Park, the Black Lodge is in the ascendance.
Yeah.
And of course, by the return, Twin Peaks: The Return, the Black Lodge is in the ascendance. I mean, you can see that in certainly, I think it's something like episode 10, where people are just vomiting. And
I mean, there is that amazing sequence.
Where Bobby Briggs finds all the people in the gridlock.
And I love the fact, again, there's no context for it. There's no explanation for it. But there is that child who is effectively a zombie, right? Or like Reagan.
Well, it's like the further down the generations you go, the more affected they are.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very clear, and I think it's been somewhat misread as well as being a kind of "hey kids, get off my lawn" thing, and it's not, because the older characters are struggling to find their way through in different ways.
Absolutely.
But they remember an old time. It's actually Lynch being quite political. They remember something. They remember things that you could hang on to. And suddenly, everything is plummeting, and the kids are feeling it,
isn't it? With his shock jock thing, that's kind of what he's getting at.
Which sounds initially like the most reactionary.
It sounds like
it's not
Glenn Beck or
some real kind of like aging sort of Ben Shapiro kind of thing going on or whatever. It's nothing like that. But that's a sleight of hand that Lynch likes to pull, and you realise that the values that he's espousing are very different.
Absolutely, he's using the language and the imagery.
Well, he's like this one man trying to get them back in ascendance, because But it's very interesting, because one of the things about Fire Walk With Me, watched in the context of The Return, is Deer Park Meadow was this place, as you say, and Chet Desmond is a kind of proto Dale Cooper.
Yep.
By Twin Peaks: The Return, Deer Park is next to Twin Peaks. The land itself has fallen
rearranged.
away.
Yes, it's almost like reality is breaking
right
down
outside of it. And Harry Dean Stanton, of course, who is in Fire Walk with Me, is this fascinating character who's like haunted and lost and fucked up. And then in Twin Peaks: The Return, what is he? He's a kind of shepherding angel.
Yeah.
You know, the only place where there is there are slivers of positivity, even amongst people who have got nothing. They're poor. They're living in trailer trash, trailer park. You know, the awful term trailer park trash, and yet it's the only place where there is.
There's aid. There's the angel, right?
And the angel. And what happens when? Oh God, episode 7. All he does is slightly stray out of his the place where he shepherds, and he sees immediately tragedy.
Yeah, immediately horror, absolute
horror and viscera, right? And
possibly one of the most horrific things David Lynch has ever put to film.
Yeah, and I think Jack has joined us. I don't want to give him any
descended from the Black Lodge. Hi, Jack.
Hello there.
We're not going to talk about Jack. In fact, we're going to leave him out of this. Who do you think this is, dear?
I'm glad I hit record early because I wanted to catch all of the impressions, all of the quotes.
Of which there are many.
Of which there will be many.
You're fresh from it, aren't you, Jack? Is fresh the right word?
Fresh is an interesting word to use for this one.
Yes, so I'm not going to be much. I don't think I'm going to be much use this trip because I'm a slow-thinking turtle creature, and I need to cogitate, and let things sort of percolate through my brain. And I've literally just watched it for the first time in it must be 10 years.
Wow!
Jump in and just steal the eye from us if anything stimulates you.
I've talked about how I deliberately don't watch things very often if they're things that I love because I don't want to deaden their effects. And this is very much one of those cases. So yes, I've broken a must be 10 years abstention from this. So, but because this is absolutely this film anyway, it's absolutely one of my favorite things.
Yeah, it'd been about a decade for me. I didn't actually watch it. I was saying to George, terribly like recently, not in the last few days. I watched it 2 months ago as part of my year-long Twin Peaks marathon. That's where it fell. But as I was saying to George, this was very much a go-to film to me when I discovered it in my middle teens, and I think I watched it weekly at that point.
I don't know how. I don't know how your mind could take it. It's such an effective film.
It was really like
back in the day when I found it. I watched it over and over.
I could not. I could not do that.
I was hypnotized by it.
I was saying to Elliot earlier, I discovered it when I was like in my very early 20s, and it was so powerful. It knocked me on my arse. I could not. There's no way I could watch this film regularly.
I think it was like as a teenager.
When was this released?
92 in the cinema. And then it was obviously a couple of years before I saw it, which was on VHS. But it was like
DVD.
So I was 16 and I saw it. I didn't see it at the cinema, but I saw it pretty soon after it came out on VHS. So I was 16 or maybe 17 by then. So,
but it felt like, for me, particularly at that age, and I was saying to George earlier that strain of the 90s, where the darkness before the dawn that never came, because symbolically speaking, the post-millennium
it was in the air, wasn't
it?
It was just in the air.
But the idea of having something that no one kind of really knew, and people's short memories had forgotten Twin Peaks really by that point, the series, I mean, and to have something that felt like such a dark mirror or such a dark lens, and
at that time,
such a strange private universe. I mean, it was incredibly enticing for a teenager. Now, I must admit, it is with the head on the shoulders I've got now, I don't think it would be as easy for me to watch it on a loop as I did then, because I think some of the things hit harder now that I'm older. But certainly then it was just like it was like a discovery. It was like, I've never been presented with film like this before.
And I suppose back then it was relatively rare, wasn't it? I mean, there was a VHS, but it wasn't terribly well distributed. The film didn't last very long at the cinema, did not make much money, was not very successful, was kind of buried by almost everyone associated with it, apart from Lynch, who was always very proud of it. So it was this kind of secret thing. And of course, it isn't the kind of thing that would have aired on British television. I can't imagine.
No.
I don't think it probably has been, but it would have been sort of
Channel 4,
3 a.m.
Yeah, it would have
BBC
been.
Two or something like that.
It would have been some obscure sort of film series, wouldn't it? Some art house film series, or David Lynch season, or something introduced by Mark Commode. That's what it would have been.
Yeah, very likely.
It's exactly the sort of thing that I was watching at that.
Me too.
I was the sort of person who was sitting up to 3 a.m. to watch the obscure film on Channel 4. That was the sort of teenager I was.
Likewise.
So yeah, it would have thinking about, because this film is actually quite. I'm not going to take over the conversation, but this film is quite entwined for me with things in my personal life, and I think of this as one of the films where I'm not the same person coming out the other side that I go in. This is a film that actually changed me. I feel like that for the better, and. Yeah, this would have been like the following year, 93, 94. I saw it, maybe on television, I suppose, if it was shown, but probably a VHS rental.
Yeah, it's a film that always just I cannot get over the emotional effect. I mean, Elliot and I were talking about it earlier. The way Lynch is he's a storyteller who doesn't believe in literalism. He just doesn't care about literalism or social tracts or anything to that effect. He's an emotional storyteller, and there's something more real about this kind of storytelling, I find, than any number of social tracts that can be spewed out.
Yeah, he is the ultimate realist in many
respects. Like I think so. I think so. It's a visceral reality.
How dysfunctionally we live. He gets how fractured we feel. He gets how fractured society is. He doesn't directly comment on, say, political situations, so that they do get in.
They get in, absolutely.
But he is just, as I said, he allows us to have that moment of going, I don't know. I don't know who I am. I don't know how I relate to things. I don't know what things are. I don't know how they exist, why they exist, or how this madness keeps running. That's what he does. We spend so much
of our time trying to divert our attention away from the existential abyss of our existence. And Lynch is one of those storytellers who takes you by the hand. He's not violent about it necessarily, but he leads you to look at the abyss and say, look, it's okay. It is where we all are. It's what we're all feeling. This prescription of our cultures and our histories and our societies that you're supposed to have this absolute notion of what you are, this absolute identity at your core, is bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. We are fluid. We are protean. We don't know who or what we are. Our experience of reality, whatever that means, is itself fluid and protean and apt to change from one moment to the next and recontextualized itself all the damn time. So there is a truth in the dreams that I'm showing you.
And
yet it is a very realistic film, I think. I mean, to me, reality looks more like that than it looks like 100 other films which are supposedly more realistic.
Oh, I think
we've talked about realism as an ideology. To me, the world looks a hell of a lot more like a David Lynch film than it looks like 100 quote unquote realistic films. And it's an extreme. Absolutely, you're quite right that he dwells upon the way in which people are they are not a set and finished and closed system. People are not. You can't define it, and yet at the same time he does believe in the self. He does believe in individual subjectivity, and we know that because that's where he starts from. And it's a funny thing to say. It might strike people as a funny thing to say about a filmmaker who's thought of as very conceptual and aesthetic and stuff like that, but he starts from character. And
I think one of the great
that's why this film is so great, and that's why it ends up at politics, and that's why it ends up at stuff about society, and because this ends up being a ferocious, furious indictment of patriarchy.
Oh,
this film.
absolutely.
God, yeah, this is
And
one
it
of the
gets there,
most
but it gets-
feminist films I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But
it
it's
gets
also
there
an
by
example.
starting with a profound, empathic, and honest interest in characterization in Laura Palmer. That's
Laura Palmer,
where this
right.
film comes from.
But
He
in
sits
that- in
down.
that
He and
respect,
his co-writer, they sit down to think about who is this woman, who was she,
But that comes
and that's how we get to this
after,
incredible structure.
2 seasons.
Go ahead.
And this is where I think that it's a credit to him, because he decides to make a Twin Peaks film. As mad as that was,
As
because
crazy
Twin Peaks
as
was
that
dead
was
in
at
the
the
water
time.
by that
Yes.
that moment. It had its brief moment, its flash of excitement and popularity, and then it had died. No one wanted this. And he says, I'm not only going to make a film, I'm not going to pick up from where it left off, I'm going to make a film about Laura. Now, that is an incredible coup, because in that moment, he does exactly what Jack says. There's this film that is intensely about the horrors of patriarchy. But the beginning of his film is an act of turning an object into a subject, because Laura is the object of Twin Peaks.
That's in
She
my
is the
notes. I've got the
subject
phrase
of
"turn an object into a subject."
Oh
in
my
notes
God!
that I've
Yeah,
just
But she is the subject of this movie.
Mhm.
This murdered young woman on whom all those various narratives could be thrown without her being able to give her own point of view. Now here she is in this movie on screen. She talks, she moves, she is there. And that's incredible as a starting point. It brings the voice of a destroyed woman back to life. It makes her the focus. And what I love, and I know partly that was because there came this young woman in to effectively play a corpse and have a photograph taken of her in high school regalia, and he realized she had something, and boy does she have something. But it's the genius of this movie is he is not afraid to portray her as contradictory. As being on both sides of the divide as much as black and white lodges. So you've got when you were talking about earlier, George, about critical response, this is too much for the critics. We get this explanation for why she exists as she does in the Return series, which brings this real horror to proceedings. But just in this film, we have to navigate how this young woman is all things, but not because she's badly characterized, not because she's immoral. It's because she is trapped, tormented, buffeted, unable to find any foothold in her world, because it always crumbles. And that is
she's
the
surrounded by
subject
people
of David
who
Lynch's
demand that
film.
she be different things and different people at every given moment.
Yeah.
Everybody in her life needs her and wants her and demands that she be somebody else.
And that includes it includes the film itself. It includes the medium itself. In the original series of Twin Peaks, where she is effectively a cipher, you know about Laura, but you know about her through other people. You know about her through retrospect, through diaries, through accounts of her. You are told constantly, you are buffeted with this notion that she was loved by everyone. She was purer than pure. And then you start getting these other narratives coming in where we know that's not the case. She was involved in all sorts of illicit and dark things. This puts it absolutely on the screen, and that tension is part of the message, isn't it? That tension is part of the message. It's part of the feminism of this film. She is it's not just part of the feminism, it's part of the humanism of the film. She's not one thing. She's not simple.
It's something that's even developed, because you have that, how it's developed in Twin Peaks, how it's developed here, and then how it is finally made explicit in the return of why she is the way.
I'm treading
subject, which I'm
very
not going
carefully.
to say. But and then it's, oh my God, your breath runs out of you when you realize why these things are the way they are. But it's kind of interesting, because you do look at some of this and think, Laura has tasted the extremes of life. That's what they've put on in Fire Walk with Me. I do find it funny, all these people expect different things of her, and I think at one point she sees James Hurley as something of a foothold, but she says he's so boring.
But also he's trying to anchor her to a particular type of story. He's trying to anchor
even that is a way of demanding something of her. Even
absolutely,
that, I feel desperately for James in this film, because he's trying, but he cannot not do what he's doing, which is another form of demanding that she be a certain kind of person, just by the nature of the world that he lives in. caring about her and trying to protect her is another form of the patriarchal control
That's it,
reach
exactly,
that
yes.
every single man in her life is putting over her. I'm a bit emotional. I just finished it.
He's tried to
Yeah.
white knight her. I mean, I don't think he's
Absolutely,
doing
yeah.
it in a but there is no salvation in the arms of the heroic good rebel biker. It's like us, but the where it sort of led me was, it's like rather asking someone who's been hitting smack to settle for a pot of tea. They know it's better for them. They know it's safer. They know it might save their life. It doesn't dangle premature death in front of them, but it's still to be oppressed by some a structure, and
He's
there's
still
nothing like
demanding that she should be what he wants her to be. He's
Exactly.
still,
Right.
yeah.
And we see an awful lot of female suffering in this film. We see women being hysterical. We see the choices made by women as being framed as wrong. So there's parts of some we think, oh, okay, hang on a moment. So was saying that the sex work and the drug taking, everything, that's darkness? But then you don't. And the most heroic point of the movie for me is that moment of intense female solidarity when Laura saves Donna from the same trajectory.
Yeah.
That's an incredible
what it is,
sequence.
This film, like so much of Lynch's work, it looks on the surface like it actually relies upon a very old-fashioned and reactionary form of moralistic worldview, moralism. That's not it at all. What this film is about sin, and it's about sin in the old sense, in the proper sense, in the sense that they actually meant when they talked about sin in the ancient texts. It's not about how you should behave for the sake of society. It's about how you should behave for you. The problem with sin, what a sin actually is that which hurts you. It is a denial. It is your own denial of your own humanity through actions that harm yourself. That's what it's about. This film isn't saying that sex work and drugs and things like that are sinful in the sense that they are bad, they are against God, or they are against society or anything like that. It's saying that what she's doing is sinful because she is harming herself.
Yes,
and she's harming herself because she's trapped. It's not even judging her for that, though. It's not saying she's harming herself, therefore she's bad. It's showing you precisely why she's doing it as well.
Exactly.
The world that has brought her to this,
how everyone else is actually
sinful state,
is actually doing bad by her.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. It's trying to paint a world in which goodness cannot survive, right? That's the whole point. The log lady tells her that. The log lady tells her that when she encounters her.
Yeah.
And the sin that she's committing over and over again in different forms throughout the movie is the annihilation of the self. She's annihilating herself.
Yeah.
And she's annihilating herself because, as far as she knows from the world that she's grown up in, being a self is being a completely irreconcilable and incomprehensible mess of different performances for the sake of different vampiric exploiters.
Exactly that.
From the school to to the family,
to
every relationship, every
in Lynch,
context.
the entire world is high school.
Yeah. So everything is performance, and it's exhausting her, isn't it? It's fraying her, it's tearing her apart, and even the metaphysics of this universe is doing exactly the same damn thing.
Yeah.
What looks like a salvation, almost like a bizarre kind of salvation at the end when she finds her way into the black or white lodge. It's not. She's become an avatar. She's become prey to some other set of restrictions and parameters. Yeah,
I mean this. Yeah, the beautiful good.
Because I suspect that you're speaking from subsequent context that I don't have. So, yeah. I haven't watched the rest of the text, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I don't think the rest of the text ruptures or damages the the things we're pulling from this text at all.
No,
In fact,
I don't think so. I think
enhances them.
these, yeah, absolutely. I would say that Fire Walk with Me and certain scenes within Fire Walk with Me in particular are basically the Rosetta Stone for the
Fire
new
Walk with Me,
season.
is basically Twin Peaks: The Return in abstract. It
Yeah,
owes
yeah.
far more to this movie than it does to the original series.
It
The original series has its
almost-
own strengths, but
Yeah, it
um,
almost deliberately disavows the first season and
Yeah.
completely inverts it on every level.
yeah.
I've always
Lynch
taken
gets to do
her state, Laura's state at the end of the film, to be that she's with the Dale Cooper who is replaced at the end of the second series by Bob, essentially.
Yeah.
She is essentially a prisoner. She's essentially trapped, but she is with. I mean, the corpse in the bed in her dream tells her, doesn't it?
Annie, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Heather Graham. Yeah.
But it's
Is that
fascinating,
Heather
isn't it?
Graham? Bloody hell.
That's because Heather Graham is in the end of, because the links are manifold. At the end of season 2 of Twin Peaks, the original series, Heather Graham comes into it as a character, and she is trapped in the Black Lodge, and Dale goes in for her, and in this movie, she appears to Laura before she's actually gone in there. I love that.
I have a very weird relationship with Twin Peaks as a text, because I saw the original television show when it was on, and I don't believe I've ever watched it again, and I've never seen The Return. For me, Twin Peaks is mostly just this
Fire Walk with Me, which is no bad thing. No bad thing at all.
The things I feel like the things I remember most from the original television series are the things that the movie references, because the movie made them stick in my mind.
Yeah.
Do you know, I think David Lynch would love that. I think David Lynch himself would love that. You know, that you have a memory of the television series going out, haven't seen his new one, and basically have this film.
Yeah.
I think he would be like quite tickled by that. But I think, making this film about Laura, like we said, the beautiful citizen, good citizen, kind homecoming queen of the daylight hours, who is the all the other things in the dark.
I think we
hours.
said we needed to do a Jekyll and Hyde podcast.
Well,
didn't
indeed.
we?
Wow,
Here we
we're
are.
kind of doing it now, aren't we? I mean,
Yeah.
in many, many ways. Again, I love the discrepancy with like the way certainly the original series frames Laura, the way everyone talks about her, and even her theme. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. You get the impression of someone white, almost like a Galadriel figure, someone who is white than white, more beautiful than beautiful, and that
I always say that about. Yeah.
Even when you
can live a life like that. No
It's
wonder
true in a deeper sense, isn't it? It's true in a deeper sense.
Yes, it
The thing that-
absolutely is.
They always canonize murder victims. I think Terry Eagleton said, I'm glad that I'm not a wonderful, beautiful, amazing person, because I'm not likely to be murdered. Because it seems like only the perfect people ever get murdered.
Yes, absolutely true.
Once you get past all this sort of sentimental mythologization and frankly self-indulgent, salacious cant that people always make up about murder victims,
quite frankly.
Yeah. But once you get past that, you find, I think, on a deeper level, it's true. She's an angel.
Yeah. Almost literally by the end of the show. I mean, I always have the impression, that those who are elevated to the lodges, they become principals. They become almost like demigods in a way. And I get the impression that's what happens to Laura here. And it's been manipulated around her. Like there's nothing that she can do to escape it. It's inevitable. It's absolutely inevitable. And that sense of inevitability is throughout the entire film. I was saying to Elliot earlier, one thing that got me this time is the way characters presage themselves all the way through. It's like they are aware of the fact that they are in a story or in a piece of media, and they're almost aware of the script or of the type of story that they're in. You've got that wonderful scene with Coop where he had a dream of his own duality, of the doppelganger to come. And it happens. It actually occurs here. He sees it on the monitor.
On the television.
Yeah, on the television, right. Laura, she doesn't ever state it, but you get the impression that she is aware on some inarticulate level that something is going to happen to her, that she is doomed or damned in some particular way. You get
Well,
it
she
from
also knows that the audience are watching, because she
Yes.
gets visions of the bright white fizzing light of a television, and she looks up into the corner of the bedroom, doesn't she, where she
She
sees the
does.
light and she hears the static of the television, and she screams, "Who are you?" Well, I think she's demanding that of the audience.
Of us,
She's demanding
right?
that of the television
Yeah.
audience. Yeah.
Absolutely, of
And
ours.
of course, The Return picks up on something that Lynch obsesses with in Lost Highway, which is the idea of people being on roads that just keep going in a linear fashion, and they can't help but put their foot down. The road is laid out for them. The inevitabilities of their own personal narratives are laid out for them. They have agency, but Twin Peaks: The Return keeps coming back to it, and Lost Highway comes back to it. This idea that even though they know, they won't hit the brake.
Yeah, there's
They
nothing you
won't
can
turn
do.
the car around.
There's nothing you can do. That seems to be. It's almost the conclusion that the metaphysics comes to, isn't it? That you can't do anything. You're impotent. You're absolutely impotent.
Laura says it herself to James near the end. She says to him, "There's nowhere else to go."
There's nowhere else to go. There is nowhere else to
Nothing
go.
exists apart from that. And also what she says to Donna about falling through space,
Mm-hmm.
and that you would just burn up. Now, one of the images in the opening episode of Twin Peaks: Return is someone falling through space.
Yeah.
And then she says, there are no angels anymore.
Mhm.
And
Not for her.
it's all there percolating away, and it all comes back in the new version. But then you were saying about TV earlier. I mean, this is a film that begins literally with Lynch smashing a TV. It's the first shot.
No, it's fairly, the symbolism there isn't that subtle, is it?
No, because I think also as well, he realizes with this film, although this film was, panned and it didn't get anywhere, for him not to have to work within the structures and formulations of the TV show, here is his undistilled Twin Peaks, and as I said to you, George, the triumph of The Return is how he was able to do it for 18 hours because he was able to broadcast it on a minor station and a cult is already built up around it. So he was able to take control. But, he doesn't need to have his story nailed down by a film noir murder mystery here. He can, thank you, Jack, go full gonzo. And what does he do? He makes this film, as we say, about Laura. But it's interesting because I agree a great deal with that interpretation about sin. I think that's the true meaning of sin. I think that's true. But I am also really fascinated by how Lynch continually, through each of the Twin Peaks projects, when he looks at morality, when he looks at the concepts of good and evil, they are forces. They're like gravity. In fact, he makes it explicit in The Return about it's almost like atomic energy.
Yep.
And we are trapped between them. They are not contextualized by ethics and morality. They just are. And we have to navigate them or survive them or succumb to them. And it comes through very strongly of this idea of religion or rigid codes or laws or morality. None of it helps. They're all useless. They fail us. They reduce us. Even as we try, they become an evil in themselves. So therefore, as we know, you get the evil of evangelicals and reactionaries or fascists who demand
even on a
cleanliness
smaller
and moral
level,
rectitude.
family, right?
Family.
Yeah.
That they'll destroy you if you don't achieve it. And that's all laid out in this text. It's all laid out in this text because Twin Peaks itself is trying to be that kind of town all the time. And as you say, the demands on her, and so, but I'm very interested in the way that he sort of says good and evil are not necessarily separate. They're not governed by ethics. They are forces.
This goes right the way back to Blue Velvet.
Sorry,
In Blue Velvet, you have what seems on the surface to be the quintessential, the dark secret behind the white picket fences sort of paint and play sort of thing. And of course, it's not. When you watch it, what you have is a a topography of morality which is strictly delineated. It's strictly segregated. You have the good people behind the white picket fences, and then you have the bad people in the bad part of town doing the bad things. And again, on like so much of Lynch, on the surface, it looks almost crudely reactionary. But what you get to through Blue Velvet, what you get to is the realization that they are in separate places, therefore they are different things. But at the same time, they can't exist independently. The one has to have the other somewhere. You know, it has to be there down the road. For, you know, the bad part of town has to be there so that the good part of town can exist.
It's the same with the White and Black Lodge, isn't it? I mean, it's made explicit in Twin Peaks: The Return that they are parts of the same mechanism, and it's fundamental to reality. They cannot, you cannot have one without the other. It just doesn't work.
And again, that ties directly back in with the kind of, it's actually medieval Christian Neoplatonic moral theology.
Yeah.
You know, the sins come from.
Yeah, absolutely. And even Laura Palmer herself, she seems to be like a linchpin that's holding these realities together somehow. And the way she's doing it is by becoming the vessel, or even like the goddess of pain and of suffering and abuse. She's taking it all on herself. She's the quintessential goddess in that regard. She's all women. She's all female.
For their sins.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
Not through being sinless.
not through being sinless, exactly. And that, what you just said about that kind of cosmology, that kind of that medieval, when you watch something like The Return, you're not presented with, I mean, I know this will mean more to you, George, but the senorita and the fireman, they're not benevolent gods.
No,
they are locked in a cosmic impasse with the figures in the Black Lodge. And they'll do anything, and they'll use anyone to achieve it.
Yeah, and do. I mean, and that's what this is all about. These stories, that's what it's about ultimately, isn't it? It's that. It's not even a battle. It's a mechanism.
It's a mechanism. That's right. It's not, They are, I mean, even in Fire Walk with Me, we see all of them sitting together in the convenience store, which is obviously Philip Jeffries' interpretation of what the Black Lodge looks like, or it is the front of the Black Lodge. But there, Mrs. Chalfont and her grandson are there. Bob is there. The little man is there. The woodsman is there. These are all people or figures or beings that we're led to believe are in dire opposition to each other. They're not.
They're
all
it's
part
all
of the
politics,
same mechanism,
isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. It's all very political and very polite, isn't it?
It's just how they inveigle their way into our world and who they manipulate and how and for what reason.
It reminded me of Olympus in Clash of the Titans, actually.
Yeah,
they're all there together, despite the fact that they're constantly feuding, and they have the amphitheater with the little figures made from clay that they play their game with. Except that what they are, they are very extravagantly and explicitly symbols in this. And we've joked about this before. We've joked about things where people say, "Oh, this thing is symbolic. What's it symbolic for? Nothing. It's just symbolic." I believe that's actually a Terry Pratchett joke. And we've talked about that sort of analysis in various films. I think what Lynch is doing is he's beating you over the head with the fact that these things are symbolic, because he wants you to understand that what he's actually talking about is like a system of a semiotic system, essentially.
Yeah.
He's drawing you a map of how people create systems of semiotics to express all these things that they do, sin and goodness, for instance.
Yes,
they are manifestations of those things.
Yeah, it's interesting when you apply that to the figure of Bob, isn't it? Because Bob's much more wrinkled in this than he is in Twin Peaks. He's far more interesting in Fire Walk with Me than he is in Twin Peaks. In Twin Peaks, he's a demon, effectively, isn't he? He's just a demon in Twin Peaks. He's an evil, he's an id. He's a big, giant, walking id, and he possesses Leland Palmer and does awful things to Laura and ends up killing her. But it's unambiguous in Twin Peaks that Bob is the one who drives Leland to kill her. In Fire Walk with Me, it's a little bit more wrinkled. You get the impression that, and this is, again, it's made explicit in The Return, Bob doesn't he is not the controlling force. He kind of drives. He digs in the dirt of what's already there and brings it to the surface. So whatever Leland does when Bob is in possession, it's there already.
Bob is the expression of that part of Leland that does the things it does.
Exactly.
One of the master strokes of Firewalk with Me is that just for an instant towards the end, Leland shows Laura the mirror, and he shows her that in a little, just for a flash of a second, she's Bob as well. Bob is in her as well.
Yeah.
It's just that aspect takes the form of that it does, because it's, frankly, in the kind of world that we're all living in, it's much more a male energy. In practice.
That's exactly it. Just as an aside, I think it's one of the most horrific moments in any of the Twin Peaks media when she realizes who Bob is. I think it's awful. I think it's
almost
just
unbearable.
It's unbearable. Yeah, it's abject.
Yeah.
It's appalling.
I'm so weak and watery now compared to how I was when I was 16 or 17 or whatever. I remember this film having a profound effect on me, but watching it again this time round, there are bits of this film that I struggle to deal with. I sort of jump. I was watching it,
what I was
literally
saying
just finished watching it, and
there
are at least 3 bits of the film that actually made me jump, or very nearly jump, out of my chair and run away from the screen I was looking at. They are so horrifying and intense.
I think so. Yeah.
I mean,
it's the horror, but it's also the when the sadness is so profound now.
Yeah.
I mean, this is it. I mean, this is one of the the things about getting older.
I've been
one of the pitfalls of it's one of the pitfalls of getting older, isn't it? I mean, I guess it's awareness of both awareness of our own mortality, but also greater awareness of how cruelties operate. We are very resistant and resilient when we're teens in some ways, or younger people in some ways. I said I could watch it. I watched it once every week. It was just utter fascination to me. And yet watching it 2 months ago, I still think it's a fantastic piece, and on some level I still enjoy it, but it's painful at times.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's hard to watch. It's a hard watch. And this, unlike the original series of Twin Peaks, which has these softening elements, it switches in between the darkness. You have the darkness and the metaphysics and the murder mystery, and then you have the soap opera stuff, which is jolly and bouncy and funny. You have Norma and Ed and all that kind of stuff, which is great fun. None of that is in Firewalk with Me.
No.
It reaches a pitch and then just keeps going. And that's so deliberate. It is so deliberate. And I think it's part of why people disliked it. I don't think they could express why they disliked it, because it was making them feel what it was intended to make them feel.
Yeah. And I think
if you make a TV series that's basis is, who killed Laura Palmer, and you have a success with it, that's great. But if you then make a film as a sort of prequel stroke coda, where it turns out that the answer to who killed Laura Palmer is men in general, or patriarchy,
society, patriarchy, history,
exactly,
the forces
Western
of history.
civilization. If you do that, and then the same people that like the TV series on the I wonder who done it, they don't hate it, you've probably done something wrong.
Yeah, it's probably true. And that is it, isn't it? It's that abjection. You've got this one person, Laura Palmer, who's a fucking teenager, for God's sake, who's got no agency or power at all, even within the family structure, within her own friend structures, being subject to these
that washing hands scene,
crushing, soul withering forces that were there centuries before she was born. She's got no say. She's got no agency. She's got no power. Her power is to die. That's her power. That's her escape, right?
I struggle to think of a text that puts across as clearly the idea of self-destruction as a desperate grapple for control.
Yeah.
A desperate grapple for empathy. And that is so fundamental to so much that we do in our alienated state.
Yeah. And I would say that the return absolutely exemplifies that, because it pivots on the idea that an attempt for her not to have that control through her death drive is a crime. And that's the great takeaway of The Return. It's you realize that out of supposedly good actions, heroic actions, a terrible crime is still being committed against Laura Palmer. And this is why I think that those two texts are much more firmly connected.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, even in The Return, she's just buffeted about, isn't she? She's prey to all the forces and the characters and their narratives and their stories, and they drag her around. They drag her from her lives, and it for nothing.
And then you realise there's also something that Twin Peaks itself did not go near, which is the idea that this is because it's very interested in Leland and Laura, and The Return is interested in Sarah.
Yes,
and what that brings to bear on Laura. There's much greater exploration of Sarah Palmer.
I mean, Sarah's a really interesting character certainly in the original Twin Peaks and in this film.
Largely from the performance of the actor, must be said.
Yeah. I mean, it would be very easy to have contempt for the character, wouldn't it? Being as passive as she is, but that's sort of part of the point, right? She's almost like the audience in many respects. She's the audience in front of the cinema screen. You have no say, you have no control over this. And again, she's a woman operating in a patriarchal, abusive situation. Exactly. So, what's she gonna do?
Yeah, and really, you get this sense in Twin Peaks that all the women in Twin Peaks are what Laura are would-be Lauras, or that they could be Lauras. They've not got the intensity coming to bear on them, but Norma Jennings, Shelley Johnson,
Shelley, obviously,
Audrey Horne, they are all being sucked in to this mire. It just takes different forms, and Laura almost becomes, the sacrificial lamb for them all.
Yeah.
That's why I say
she is woman, right? She becomes woman in the abstract.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why that scene in the pink room is so strong with Donna. When
oh God, yeah.
I mean, on a performance level, on a direction level, on a script level, the insistence that that this woman does not have this happen to her. It's incredible. It's an incredible moment.
Yeah, it really is. And it's so intense. I mean, it just won't stop, will it? That scene just does not stop.
Yeah, absolutely.
And almost like every male character in this film is loathsome, almost all of them.
Yeah.
Whether they intend to be or not.
Yeah.
There are one or two exceptions.
What I love about that section is the way in which it obviously it starts with Donna's really interesting in that section because she's trying to stop Laura precisely through threatening to she's sort of threatening. She's saying, if you do this, I'm going to do it.
I'm going to do it too. Yeah, exactly.
And I think Laura completely misunderstands that, or Laura interprets Donna's actions as a challenge, as a sort of a bid for parity. It's like she's saying, well, if you can do it, I can do it as well.
Yeah, it's a little sister, older sister thing, isn't it? That's what's going on there.
Laura interprets it as a challenge to her power, essentially, to her what she feels, at least in that moment, is her superiority over Donna
and her identity. Right, it's a threat to her identity. This is me. This is my escape, and you're intruding on it.
Yes, exactly. It's her bid for selfhood. It's part of her bid. It's still self-destructive, but it's her bid for selfhood. But it leads to a really paradoxical situation because it leads to Donna, I think, against her actual intentions, she ends up taking part. I think the idea was to stop the events taking part, but she ends up taking part in them. Yeah. So rather than she's actually egging Laura on. She's making her, inadvertently, she's making Laura continue.
Yeah.
And then I think what happens is that Laura sees she sees in Donna the same sort of paradoxical. It's that thing again. It's the road that you're on. Somebody else built the road and put you on it, and the only way to go is forward.
Mm-hmm.
She sees Donna precisely in that sort of situation, which she of course remembers. She was on that. She was at that moment herself at one point.
Yeah, and knows where the road leads. Of course, she's a bit further down.
And it's interesting when you juxtapose Laura with Teresa Banks, because they're both put into two situations which have equal but different kinds of oppression. In Deer Park Meadow, Teresa Banks, no one knows she's murdered. No one cares. That's a bleak variation of Twin Peaks. In Twin Peaks, everyone knows.
Laura survives this film and gets to be a couple of years older and moves to a different town and then gets murdered. It's exactly the same picture.
It's exactly the same, except that I think what this film very starkly puts up is that the situation with Teresa Banks is no worse than the situation with Laura. No one knew or mourned the death of Teresa Banks. No one cared. That place is a bleak Nowheresville. Whereas in Twin Peaks, everyone cared and pored over Laura and had this idea of her. Even in death, there is an interpretation of her by every single person in that place. And Lynch presents both of those as being equally despairing. But of course, to our minds, because of the platitudes we've been taught, because of the morality we've been taught, oh well, of course, it's so much better to be remembered. It's so much better to be, everyone looking out for you, and this, that, and the other. And it actually amounts to nothing.
Absolutely,
They
in fact,
both
it
have
amounts to
an absolutely
reduction.
equal situation.
Yeah, it amounts to reduction of the truth, doesn't it? Ultimately,
in a way, Teresa Banks at least had the universal truth. In her demise, which is no one gives a fuck.
Yeah, so she's
no one
been
gives
spared.
a fuck about you being a woman. No one gives a fuck that that you're a sex worker who got killed. No one cares. Right? You can just pass into the soil goodbye, and that comes back to one of obviously Lynch's pivotal things that he repeats is hypocrisy.
People have their self-image tied up in Laura Palmer.
Exactly. It's all about them.
It's all about them. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. That she's, Teresa has spared the historical mythologization that Laura is subject to.
She spared something, even though it's an absolute fucking tragedy what happens to her, but she spared that. And of course, Laura has to keep reliving it, in a sense. Yeah.
For one reason or another, Laura, quote unquote, succeeded, at least for a while, in playing the game that every woman is forced to play, which is to be all things to all men, very specifically all men, but all women as well, because it's a total system. So having succeeded at least for a while in that, I mean, it's tearing her apart. It's absolutely tearing her to pieces. It's grinding her soul into dust, but she's doing it. And having succeeded at least as far as she gets, she manages to make the entire town of Twin Peaks believe that she is who she wants them as individuals and as a collective to believe that she is. So when she turns up murdered, they have a stake in that. So they have a stake in her image, in how she is remembered, how she is interpreted, how her death is quote unquote solved. That's why they care. That's what caring means. That is why. I mean, I'm not being cruel to people who lose family members and friends to crime, but I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is the phenomenon of sort of the true crime documentary and things like that, where they get people who didn't really know the victim, the murdered person or whatever, and it's always the same. It's always about, oh, she was so nice, she was she lit up the room, and it's, you can tell when people do that, they're always talking about themselves. They're always talking about how in tune they were with this paragon, how this paragon represents their community, etc., etc.
There's a narcissism inherent, isn't there?
Yeah. And even again, I don't mean to be hurtful to anybody, but even when family members do it, it's about making themselves feel better.
Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. I mean, and it expands onto a national scale when some sort of celebrity figure dies. I mean, obviously, one of the biggest examples in our culture was Princess Diana, of course.
Yeah.
The shrieking hysteria of that event I mean, I remember that being a pivotal moment in my political awakening. Getting up that day, I was 14 when that happened. Getting up that day, seeing it on teletext, which ages us all, by the way, and thinking, "Oh, that's interesting," and going downstairs and realizing that the world had gone mad.
Well, I had a Lynchian.
I'm a bit older than you, so I had already realised by then that I just fundamentally didn't see the world the way most people seem to see it. But it was fully a vindication of my. Well, this is why I like David Lynch, because to me, David Lynch's view of the world looks like realism. It looks like the world that I recognise. It's this incomprehensible, banal, ludicrous, menacing dreamscape filled with creatures going around saying things and doing things that I really don't understand. That's just what the world looks like.
That is what the world is.
Absolutely,
that's what the world is. And I think I'm bordering on the narcissism of the self-declared outsider. I think everybody feels like that. I think really deep down, everybody feels this.
We were talking about it before.
You feel alienated from the crowd, don't you? And nothing made me realise that there is. I just don't. Those crowds mourning Princess Diana and lining up to sign the condolence books and stuff like that. I don't. I do not see the world the way you do.
Yeah.
There is
zero identification.
Well, George and I were talking about this before.
I don't understand. On an emotional level, I don't understand what you're doing.
And we were saying that
I'm not even judging you or condemning you. I'm just saying I do not get it. You see something, you feel something, you sense something here that I just do not pick up.
Don't feel at all.
Yeah, and we were talking about it just before you arrived, because we were saying exactly the same thing. That he is adept at tapping into this notion that we don't know. We don't know ourselves. We don't know why it works, and also that the moorings slip. For some of us, it's not because we're greatly intuitive or greatly intelligent. It's just that for some people, you just have that moment. You go, it's fucking mad. Yeah. And no one seems to see it's mad, and everyone's just feeding the madness. But talking about having definitely not seeing things as they were meant, that particular event you're just talking about, I had a very Lynchian interpretation of that, because I'd been out clubbing and I was swimming in chemicals, and I came home and I put on the television set at something like 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was, and the news article was talking about her in the past tense, and my drug-addled brain went, they've stripped her of her title because of Dodi Al-Fayed. And literally the next day, as I was having this terrible come down, and people were saying Princess Diana's dead, I was still insisting. I said, no, she's not dead. They've taken her title away from her and they're like, Rob, she's dead.
No, like literally dead. This is not
so it was even going beyond. It was even going beyond. Like, I don't understand what's wrong with you people. Why you're doing this, that, and the other. I literally had a completely different reality that I was operating on.
I had a moment like that where I sort of. I heard somebody woke me up that morning and told me, and I was like, yeah, fine, whatever. It's the way you do when you've just woken up and it's 6 o'clock in the morning. And I sort of knew it, and also I didn't know it simultaneously. And I was seeing, people were talking about it, and it was on the television, and I was like, this isn't real, is it?
No,
I dreamt this.
Funnily
even
enough,
though everybody was talking about it, and even though it was on the television, I was still thinking, no, this was something I dreamt this morning. So I was like, have I hopped dimensions or something?
Yeah. Is this a Mandela effect thing going on?
Exactly.
I mean, funnily enough, I had a similar thing because I saw it on teletext. It flashed up when I put teletext on, and because teletext was a bit ropey back then, I assumed that it actually meant the Queen Mother had died or something like that. It's a mistake. It's an error or something like that. It was just that distance, and also that feeling of I'd better mind my P's and Q's, because if I say what I'm thinking, I'm going to get lynched.
Well,
exactly.
Pun unintended.
That's right.
Yeah, pun unintended, But I remember speaking up at school about it because I was pissed off. I remember this ridiculous sort of prescribed morning nonsense. I was like, I'm not fucking doing that. I was like, no. I remember saying to a teacher, I didn't know her. I don't know who she was. There are real people dying all the time. I don't give a shit. I was those in that mode.
All the obvious stuff that occurs to you. I was working in a supermarket at that time. I was a bit older than you, obviously, but still quite young. And I remember that day, later on that day, when it had finally sunk in, I hadn't just dreamt this, that it was a real thing. I remember looking around and thinking, everybody, staff, customers, everybody around me thinks and feels something that I don't believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And more than that, if I say what I think to any of these people, any of them, I will, at the very least, cause a massive ruckus. I remember thinking that day, if I sort of said what I'm thinking in the staff room, there's a pretty good possibility I'd be fired.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And even if you stated it in a mild manner, I wasn't feeling mild at the time because I was 14 and depressed and whatnot. But even if you stated it in a mild manner, I'm not that interested. I don't actually feel anything. If you're articulate, you would still have gotten attacked and assaulted for it.
I could in the staff room, if I'd said, look, I respect everybody's grief, but I don't share it.
Yeah,
there's a very good chance that I'd have been sacked that day if I'd said that.
Absolutely.
And there's something about that hysterical insistence upon enforcing a belief that makes me suspect that it's not actually deep down all that sincere.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, but I
totally.
Too
if
much.
you feel the need to do that, if you feel the need to police it that much,
exactly.
How secure are you in it?
Yeah. How sincere are you about it? Yeah, it's totally that.
Really feel this? Like really deep down?
Part of the reaction you would get, the anger, is because people would feel stupid. They would start to realize they'd been manipulated into feeling a particular way, or
it's the emperor's new clothes.
Exactly that. You don't really feel that way. You don't. It's a performance. You don't really feel that way.
The kid says, "Your bollocks are hanging out, Your Highness." Everybody else in the crowd feels like an idiot. Yeah. And of course, in the fairy tale, what happens is that everybody starts laughing. In real life, what happens is that the crowd stones the kid to death.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, no, he is wearing clothes. He is.
Yeah.
Kill him. Kill the heretic who says he isn't. That's what happens in reality.
That's exactly what happens.
Sorry.
No, it's absolutely true, and it's it is something that Lynch is kind of getting at. No, it is. It absolutely is. That desire. I mean, it's the funny thing about Lynch, isn't it? He always says that he deals in dreams, but he doesn't mean fantasy.
No.
In that regard, he doesn't mean the unreal. He means the absolutely real. Yeah. That state of abstraction in which we actually operate beyond any delusion of like a shared or objective reality, which is complete bullshit anyway. He gets it. He understands.
A dream. It's a fantasy. The trial is a dream. Mm-hmm. Metamorphosis is a dream. The castle is a dream. Star Wars isn't a dream. It's a fantasy.
It's a fantasy. Yeah. Exactly that. There's no escapism here, for one thing.
No.
There's no escapism. This is confronting you with things that you probably don't want to be confronted by. It's dredging the subconscious.
Yeah. I needed to, definitely. I feel this very strongly. 17-year-old me, or however I was when I watched this, I needed to see this. I feel like I was made, it sounds like a melodramatic, sentimental thing to say, but I feel like this film made me a better person. Maybe just a little bit. Maybe it just helped a bit, a process. Mm-hmm. But I needed something. I needed this and other things at that time.
Yeah.
As an assigned male, all that sort of thing in the kind of world we live in, to sort of stop me and slap me around the face a bit and say, women are people, Jack. Yeah. They're people, and every single one of them, every single woman every single girl has gone through something like this. This is obviously an extreme example in this story, but this is what it's like. Yeah, for women and girls in your world.
Yeah.
And of course, it is something that this boomer, this white boomer guy, has not been able to leave alone, because Inland Empire and Mulholland Drive, they are also driven by the same obsession.
Yeah, totally.
That women are put through the mincer, like constantly, and it's just glossed over. That it's a daily crime to more than half the population.
Examination of misogyny is just a complete obsession.
And yet, what has been so fascinating is how the critics who loathe him, have tried to turn it on that he's the misogynist.
I don't.
He's the real.
I mean,
and it's so extraordinary.
It's
so extraordinary
infuriating,
that
isn't
level
it?
of projection.
It's infuriating, especially when you watch Fire Walk with Me, which I would say is probably the most explicitly feminist of any of his films.
Yeah.
I just don't
No, it's
understand how
classic
you
who smelt
come
it
away.
dealt it. Isn't
Exactly.
it?
That's
Yeah.
exactly it. But
Oh,
but
you talk about race, you racist. We don't
Exactly.
see color.
yeah.
Oh God, yeah.
But just that point you were saying earlier as well about the breakdown in why are people thinking this way and why am I not? And as it's only just me and maybe a few others and we're therefore in the minority, shit, we must be wrong.
Yeah.
But you get that very strongly in what George and I were talking about earlier. What I think is almost the movie in abstract, which is the Philip Jeffries scene, because it is Philip Jeffries' inability to get. He is trying to tell you everything that's going on in the story, and it's his inability to get it across for various reasons. I mean, that scene where he sort of tries to tell us everything in brief, that we're all in a dream,
Yep.
that there is something called Judy that is important, or someone called Judy, that time, reality, dreams, narrative are all entwined. Like there's a Mobius strip running through the whole fucking thing. There's something about electricity, something about screens, something about deeper layers, and the knowledge that Cooper is a duplicate. Who do you think that is there?
Who do you think
He's
that is,
warning
right?
everyone what the hell is going on. But it's
then what
hard,
happens
and he
to it?
keeps breaking up.
Yeah, what
Things
happens to him?
aren't
He gets
easy to
edited.
explain, and
He gets
that is
edited
he gets
out,
edited out of it,
It's
and that
edited-
is the most.
exactly.
That is
Yeah.
a highly real. That is what I would call a hyper realistic scene.
Yeah, that's
because it
hyper-
operates on a surrealistic level, in purely in a superficial way. But that scene is gold dust because it is the frustration to try and communicate shitloads of truths about our condition and our world and the madness. You can't do it, and he fails.
And you're being overlaid with static and interference.
Yeah.
Literally interference. You're trying to tell
interference.
people about. You're trying to talk about Judy. Who's Judy? Judy is a puppet and a beaten wife.
Yeah.
And you're being edited out. You're being overlaid with interference and static. And there's this imp that's dancing around as you try to explain yourself and getting in
And
between.
the only
you.
person in the room with you is the first thing that is said. Oh, you've had a bump on the noggin, have you, Phil? It's like, oh no, that's not helpful.
No.
But that's the kind of thing people do. Oh well, he must have gone crazy.
Yeah, he's instantly lost, hasn't he? The minute that is said, he's instantly lost.
He's gone,
Yeah.
and there's not even like an effect. He's just gone.
He's just gone.
He just isn't there. Yeah. And even the person that was doubting his rationality doesn't remember him being there. So, which is, that's Orwell. That's that thought criminal that we just liquidized or whatever it is. What is the phrase in the novel? Can't remember. The thought criminal. He didn't exist, and it's doublethink. It's an act of orthodoxy to deny the existence of the person you just eliminated for unorthodoxy.
But it's even more sinister, isn't it? Because it's like it's the universe doing it. It's the mechanisms of reality that are doing it. It's
So
not
that's the threat in 1984. The threat is that because the party is making it into the language. They're putting it into the language itself. They're paring the language down. Newspeak, and they're doing that so that eventually it will create a new reality, because language will just be a way of language will just become a way of voicing orthodox thoughts. There will be no mechanism for voicing unorthodox thoughts.
And Philip Jeffries is us.
The reason you can do that with language is because that's kind of in language already. We already do that.
And Philip Jeffries is us. You wanted to run down the supermarket and say, "For God's sake, don't you see what you're doing?" And for me, the great triumph for Philip Jeffries is he's not an everyman. He's certain of us. He's like oh God, finally someone who's like, what's going on? Who am I? What am I? What's this? How is this happening? Why the fuck is this happening? Why does it keep happening? Why does it keep looping?
Yeah.
And then you're just and he explodes.
Yeah.
He's lost because you can't beat this.
Goes off and becomes a big teapot.
Yeah, it's too big. It's too big for atomized individuals to to
But also,
reconcile
I
with,
mean,
particularly if everyone's
language-
bought into the narrative.
because this is a piece of media and it's aware of itself as a piece of media, language and symbolism have real weight in this universe. So there are magic spells here. The whole poem, through the darkness of future past, the magician longs to see one chance out between two worlds, fire, walk with me. It's an incantation.
Mm.
It's a spell.
And Mrs. Chalfont's grandson is specifically. This might be the series rather than the film, but he is specifically referred to as a magician in training, and of course, he's played by David Lynch's nephew, and he's got David Lynch's hair because he is David Lynch. I mean, is effectively that's why. But the grandson is all about illusion and magic, which has led me to the view that the grandmother, Mrs. Chalfont herself, is all about revealing. It happens in this film. It occurred to me, as I said to you earlier, George, when I was making dinner tonight, I had that "oh fuck me" moment.
The drop spatula moment.
Yeah, just the realization that what Mrs. Chalfont's function is. Because in Fire Walk with Me, Mrs. Chalfont, of course, gives Laura the painting of the door.
Painting, yeah, of course.
And
I take her to be a benevolent entity.
It gets a bit more complicated when you put her in the full context of not only Fire Walk with Me, but she's neither benign nor malignant in my view. I think what she is a truth teller. She's like a revealer.
Well, this is what most gods, quote unquote, gods and spirits and demons were before Christianity. We've even talked about this a little bit in the past when we talked about Exorcist 3. We talked about the actual entity Pazuzu in Babylonian mythology.
Yes.
He's not evil. He's dangerous and he's changeable and he represents things that are bad, but he's not evil as such.
No. But Mrs. Chalfont in this, she gives Laura the painting, which of course, once the painting is given, that's the realization. But she gains the realization of who Bob operates.
That's it. It reveals, doesn't it?
But she does. Mrs. Chalfont does this continually through the various series as well. And in the original series, she's what makes her a very interesting spirit, certainly in relation to her grandson, and they're paired together. Now, he is the illusionist. I think he is the filmmaker. He is meant to be kind of David Lynch, really. Is she has this. I don't think she's either benign or malignant, but she's got this wonderful scene with Donna in one of the episodes of the series when Donna takes over Laura's Meals on Wheels, which again is another example of Laura being this wonderfully good person viewed from the perspectives of certain people in Twin Peaks. And Mrs. Chalfont says to her, "This meal doesn't contain creamed corn, does it?" And she goes, "No." She said, "Because I do insist that my meal..." Now, as we know from Fire Walk with Me, creamed corn is the final state of human suffering. It is garmonbozia. It's what they sup. And she doesn't...
Well, the turkey gets lost in the corn.
Yeah, and she doesn't partake of it.
Yeah, of course.
She doesn't partake of it. And she also, the actress is directed to give quite an interesting reaction to Bob in the flash of the convenience store scene, which overlays on Philip Jeffries, which suggests that they are, if not antagonistic, then kind of rival spirits. So she is, but I see her as as I say, she's a kind of revealer. Every time Mrs. Chalfont appears in one of the Twin Peaks projects, the narrative is rerouted.
Yeah.
Quite significantly, and yet she has 3 lines maybe in the entire project, but she's and
they're more like tarot cards than entities.
Yes,
yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, the woodsman, the grandmother, the dancing man, the masked child.
But I've always taken them to be fundamentally symbols or signs more than they are objects. I mean, we've talked a lot about this in all the things we've talked about, Hannibal and the various films. The the hesitation. The question, is this supernatural or not?
Yes,
I keep coming back to that, but it's something that this sort of cinema keeps coming back to, and this sort of text keeps coming back to. The question just becomes completely irrelevant with this. I mean, it's you try to ask that question of this text. It's like, what are you? You're trying to play a lasagna in a Blu-ray player. You're mismatching concepts here. This isn't about supernatural or not supernatural, or
why would you even apply that dichotomy to this universe?
Yeah.
It just doesn't
we are
make
in
any
a world of
sense.
signs and symbols.
And
That's
yet
what this is. It's
sometimes
a
the
world of
signs and
symbols.
symbols in this universe work in such fascinating ways because they can have function. So I mean, thinking particularly of the ring, the ring with the owl ring with the infinity symbol on it, and it literally only occurred to me on the viewing I had a couple of months ago. After all the times I've watched this film, it's, oh my God, the ring, the top of the ring, the green part of the ring is made from the Formica table with this ring ID wed. And what is Formica? It insulates against electricity. How do they travel? Down pylons.
Through electricity,
through televisions. And it's like, oh my God, it's an insulator. So sometimes the moments that seem to deeply upset people in terms of, oh, he's just being indulgent, they have function, they have actual reason to exist, and sometimes they are just pure signs and sometimes they are much more abstract. But after all this time, it's like, oh my God, yes, that's a definite function within the plot. That the wearer of the ring is but again, I love the fact that it's polysemic, that all his signs and symbols explode. The ring insulates against the electricity, so it becomes a way to move through realities. It is also a way to protect against death. Obviously, the one-armed man puts it on Ronette Pulaski at the end of this movie, but it also signifies being marked for death.
Yeah.
So it's all the signs that they multiply in meaning. They become more and more pregnant.
Yes, the signs
they are
used because this is what signs are. This is what symbols are. They are things that we use to rearrange reality, to consciously rearrange our understanding of the world around us. And if we believe in magic, materially rearrange the world around us using symbols. Magic really is just it bears the same relation to semiotics as alchemy does to modern chemistry. It's just our attempt to understand how we construct the world through symbols and significations. And that's what this is. It's like this gigantic field of symbols and signs and signifiers, and they're like iron filings, and they are subjected to a succession of magnetic fields. Some are negative and some are positive, and they rearrange themselves not according to their own properties, their own shape and size or whatever, or their own relationship to each other. They rearrange themselves according to the fields of magnetic force that they're subjected to. And the fields of magnetic force are people's perceptions. And then they move around the piece of paper because the magnet underneath the piece of paper is somebody's moving that around to try to create patterns. It's like one of those games that you have when you're a kid, when you try to create faces with mustaches and things with little iron filings and a magnet. That's what we do. That's what we do in life. That's how we try to construct our own reality, our own understanding of reality, our social relationships. And so we do it by manipulating the signs and the symbols and the significations around us. And the trouble is that we've got our little magnets, and then there are other people that have bigger magnets, and then there are these gigantic magnetic fields quite apart from anybody holding a magnet. That's this gets at that. So
this
much
text really shows as well that, as I say, it is forces. You need to strip away the religiosity, the morality, all the things that are overlaid on. This is about forces. Some are competing forces, some are the same forces, just pulling in slightly different directions. And
they're not unreal. The symbols are not. They're not unreal. Because you give them signification. They're not unreal. The angel is not a symbol of innocence and purity and redemption because that's something that you imagine or put onto it, or something that you feel about it because it's in a picture that was above your bed when you were a little girl. It is that because you feel that. But it can be other things as well if other people feel things about it that are different, or decide to use it in another way, or use it against you.
Exactly. There's a fluidity of symbolism and metaphor that a lot of people do find difficult to take in not just in Lynch, but in fiction in general.
It's the ideology of realism. We're supposed to, we feel, because we've been ideologically indoctrinated by the ideology of realism, we go into texts like this expecting to be able to say, right, well, A lines up with C and B lines up with F. That's why it's superficially a whodunit. It's an inversion of Lynch constructs his texts out of the aesthetics of pulp fiction a lot of the time. He constructs it out of the aesthetics of romantic fiction, fiction for girls, teenage girls, fiction for boys, film noir, detective fiction, pulp fiction, and stuff like that. Loads of it is quotations from that. And part of why this is framed as a whodunit with a cop who's investigating, and part of why it's filled with clues that don't appear to line up with anything. There's a little piece of paper here with a T on it,
of course,
and then that doesn't seem to link up with it.
Like to link up to anything, yeah.
That doesn't lead you to the murderer. So the people, when we go in with this thinking with our I've been indoctrinated into the ideology of quote unquote realism brains, we see, well, that didn't go anywhere. That didn't lead us to the murderer. Well, precisely. This is what
it's not meant
doing.
to, right?
It's presenting you with something more real than realism, which is that the world is full of signs and symbols and signifiers that do not necessarily lead anywhere, that do not lead to any sort of resolution that makes moral or social sense and that makes order out of chaos. That's just not how the world actually works.
Yeah.
But we insist
as
on
you say,
staying in the we
it's
insist
as
on staying in the
surreal
kindergarten.
as reality. Yeah.
Or rather, our
surreal as
society
reality.
insists that we stay in the kindergarten because then it's
Well, so do we in 100 ways, though, because these things force us to confront the fact that we do that as well. We go in, we're not innocent going in. We go in indoctrinated into that ideology as well. And as we're watching it, our brain is trying to, I can't speak for anybody else, but my brain is that the lich, and they're going, so what does that mean? Why does that link up to anything? And the film is forcing you to face the fact that that's a full-on enterprise that only works within texts. That are hermetically sealed within that particular ideology.
It's amazing, isn't it? 'Cause it's actually, in many ways, it's asking you to operate in a way that's contrary to your evolved nature. I mean, we are pattern-seeking entities by our very nature, and that's why stories are often constructed in this very syllogistic, very simplistic way. A leads to B, leads to C, slots into tab D, And
that's
Lynch is
precisely
saying,
why we live in a world that's filled with signs and symbols that we rearrange to try to make sense of it, and then somebody else comes along and rearranges them in the opposite direction. That's why we live in this world. That's why we live in the world that's like that.
It's kaleidoscopic, isn't it? There is no one set or absolute pattern, and seeking after it is a mistake. It's an error. You're not going to find it because it's a kaleidoscope that's endlessly shifting and moving, and whose components are endlessly changing nature on you.
And the self, as you were saying when I came in, the self is that as well. It's not just that the self is this thing that makes sense outside of a chaos of symbols. The self is a chaos of symbols.
It is a chaos of symbols.
Part of the same chaos of symbols, yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, and it's in many respects, it's almost nihilistic, isn't it? It's almost despairing, the conclusions that one could draw from that. It's almost almost abject. It's almost like it's saying, and therefore trying to exhibit any kind of control over that is just a mistake. It's an error.
It's an incredibly risky, dangerous enterprise. It's likely to get you killed. It gets Laura killed. Yeah. But the self is a real thing. I said that coming in as well. It's protean and it's fluid and it's incoherent and it's irrational, but it is a thing. Selfhood and subjectivity are real. People are real in the world of David Lynch.
Yeah.
It's okay that we're made of all this incoherence. We are still us.
Yes, and I think we discussed this earlier, didn't we? He exhibits that by making characters. You get it obviously through the various doppelgangers and various different alternate versions of characters that occur throughout the Twin Peaks media, but you also get characters who change dramatically, shift on themselves dramatically, to the point where some of them totally invert themselves.
Yeah, Ben Horn is a classic example between.
Again, I don't want to spoil it, but what the return does with Ben Horn is fucking spectacular. It really is. I mean, it's funny, and yet also quite profound as well.
Yeah. None of those characters come back as we.
No,
and again, it's the very problem that he encounters on Fire Walk with Me. It's the expectation is there, and he goes, "No,
no, not we're not going to do it." Yeah. I mean, in the return, he even does it with Coop to a degree. The most absolute character in this entire series, technically.
Yeah.
It's brilliant, honestly. What he does with those characters it's spectacular. I can't wait for you to see it, Jack. I really want to get your response to this.
I mean, I genuinely think you could leap off Fire Walk with Me into The Return without having to go back to the original series.
It would actually be really good. Yeah, I think that would help a great deal, to be honest, because there's not much that carries over narratively from the original series. It's thematic more than anything, isn't it?
I mean, there's the issue with minor characters, but I mean, I imagine they're in some way still in your memory somewhere. From what they did, but it is. Yeah, it is.
It's more vibes, isn't it, than anything?
Yeah,
it's vibes more than anything.
Yeah. Whereas I think the whole approach is very much Lynch going, I'm picking up from the movie.
Yeah,
more how I'm going to do it. There's nothing about The Return that's come hither, is there? I mean, the original series, at the end of the day, did have to broadcast on a quite a big mainstream channel.
Mm-hmm.
The movie is the movie. The limited event series was able to go out on on a cable channel.
Yeah.
So he was able to wrest a great deal of in fact he wrested full control.
He had to wrestle for it as well, didn't he? Apparently, there was a lot of problems.
He basically, once they started to
interfere,
he said, well, you either have me or you don't, but there's no halfway.
There's no halfway measures here.
He said, I will just walk from the project.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of how he has to be over something like this.
He's got nothing to lose. And
not at 75,
No, and also he didn't want to do it, did he? I mean, that's the other thing. He wasn't that bothered about doing it. That's the other thing. He said he was done. So either way.
It was slightly... He came at two angles from it, because he said that he felt that the place, the town, and the characters always carried on going in his head.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I thought of hundreds of scenarios for them.
Yeah, I bet he has.
The problem is when someone says to you, okay, go and make it, do they actually mean go and make it, or do they mean we're going to interfere with you the entire way?
Uh-huh.
And of course it started as one thing, looked as though it was going to be coming that. Then he said, well, walk. So they basically just gave it back to him in France and said, okay, it's yours.
Thank God for that decision. Eh?
Yeah.
Because it is, alongside Hannibal, it may be the best television I've ever seen.
Yeah, I would definitely go along with saying it, certainly this century, where I'm afraid to say pickings have been slim.
A little bit slim, yeah.
For reasons that we've talked about, systemic reasons we've talked about a great deal. But yeah, I mean, when I think of great pieces,
he's even a little bit snide about that in The Return, isn't it? Because The Return is a giant satire of television since the 2010s, the early 2010s.
Yeah, but at the same time, somehow not glib. I mean,
it's not glib. No,
still, it's there, but it's still a serious endeavor, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It's still it is still about those bigger concerns.
It's just part and parcel of the whole process.
And this film being so important to each of us as well, I think one of the really satisfying outcomes is this film is not compromised for, nothing. You don't feel as though there are things that we, even tonight or separately, have pulled from this film that are upended by The Return. Not at all.
If anything,
far from it.
I think what The Return does with Fire Walk with Me is fantastic. I think it's absolutely wonderful because it solidifies Fire Walk with Me. First of all, you have this notion that it's almost like a multiverse. So there are any number of Laura Palmers, there are any number of Dale Coopers, there are any number of different realities where different scenarios are playing out. It's quantum foam, it's string theory. It's all this notion of the Mandela effect and multiple realities, and yet there are fundamental
multiple
laws.
Programs. I mean, put it in media terms, it's
different types of media. Yeah, but the Fire Walk with Me universe is the principal one.
It is, yeah.
It's the one from which all of the major forces and players originate.
Yeah,
and I kind
of
love it for that. I kind of love it for that. But wow, I mean,
You'd already sold me on it, so yeah.
No, honestly, it's brilliant. It is absolutely gobsmackingly brilliant. There are certain things that occur where I couldn't believe he'd done it.
Well, I did. As I said, I finished last night after a year of going through the Twin Peaks universe. and including Fire Walk with Me.
Mhm.
And yeah, I was, well, Vicky and I, at first we went, should we put on something else? Just something light. We couldn't do it.
Yeah.
We just sat there.
You need to digest, don't you? You need to digest. And in fact, watching it again with Fire Walk with Me in your head as a Rosetta Stone really changes the experience. And they recontextualize one another. That's what's so brilliant. They work in tandem in this beautiful.
They become reactivated in different ways. They are consistent with what, as I say, it doesn't upend anything that Fire Walk with Me already does and already has done so splendidly. But the amount of times you go, oh,
yeah,
because suddenly a point in Fire Walk with Me, which seems throwaway, right, becomes hugely significant.
Yeah, powerful and significant. Yeah. Yeah,
and it's a true mythology, and then it becomes expansive and very detailed and very rich and very varied. And I guess, again, giving nothing away, there are still things in the penultimate episode I just don't know, even on a technical level, how he pulls off, because it links in so much with things like Fire Walk with Me. And say, are you doing that?
Yeah,
are you actually doing that?
There are certain things where it's like, you clever bastard, how? And the way he seeded story, that natural way, he's just seeded elements in things like Fire Walk with Me that then pay off, that he's made pay off.
I know.
I just utter brilliance, just genuine utter brilliance. And I loved what it did with Bob, This Fire Walk with Me does it as well, where it diminishes him slightly, in the sense that it's really Leland Palmer we're looking at, isn't it? It's the darker, incestuous, rapine elements of Leland Palmer, and therefore it's a kind of wider commentary upon the dynamics between fathers and daughters anyway, which is very, very dark and unpleasant in many respects. The Return does that too.
It's interesting you say that, because Jack will know this, because we've been sending chunks of our various fiction to each other for a while, and there's a family in my story, and even though it's a benign relationship between a father and daughter, and that they get on rather well, there is still the spectre of lots of things which are very, very unsettling in the form that relationship takes in this kind of society. And the particular character I'm writing about, it's her awareness that she is censored, that it is somehow to do with her sex and her sexuality that is giving her father these terrible crises, but it's all under the surface, and it's just this whole thing that's not addressed. I
love the fact that Lynch goes there, right? And also, that people are willing to go there in their fiction to say this about the family structure, something that's so enshrined, that's so prescribed in our cultures. Oh no, this is pure, this is beautiful, this is the way things should be. When in fact the reality, as we all of us know on some level, that's just not the reality. And it's just not the reality.
Because he is so stark about things. I said before, that the hand washing before dinner scene is just so hard to watch.
That's one of the most unpleasant.
It's so difficult to watch.
Yeah.
And yet, but it shines a light on just the sheer casual abuse in those structures.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be to that extreme, but the controlling, the manipulation, the tormenting.
Cheryl Lee in that moment is fucking spectacular. In fact, throughout this is her film, isn't it? It absolutely is her film, and she's amazing.
She was not even an actor, and she literally came in to play the corpse of Laura Palmer in the original series, and had the photograph taken as the homecoming queen.
Wow.
She was just somebody who just got in on that gig.
Wow.
And it was Lynch who went, this woman's really, really good and really interesting. And therefore he created the character of Maddie Ferguson for her, who was Laura Palmer's cousin in the original series, which of course was completely so easy to buy, because not only was the series riffing on those kind of mid-afternoon daytime American soaps where they pull that kind of thing, someone's cousin turns up and it's the same actress who's in the previous season, but it's then feeding into things that this movie runs with, like doppelgangers and dream selves and things like that.
Exactly that.
And she is phenomenal as Maddie Ferguson. And then in that very Lynch way, he becomes, because he has a fascination with certain actresses. I mean, Laura Dern turns up an awful lot in his stuff, and he absolutely was like, I need to make this film about her now.
Yeah.
So it's partly because of the actress. It's partly because he felt, I said turning object into subject was part of his wish anyway. But he made this amazing discovery, and he'll say in interviews to this day, it's like, I just don't know how it happened. I shouldn't have got that person.
Serendipity,
just to come in to play a corpse.
It's one of those weird things where you can, I get it sometimes when something goes so absolutely right, where there is confluence on a particular project, and you can't imagine it being any better than that.
And the real shame is, of course, because the film was received as it was and Lynch is starred to fall. I mean, I don't give a damn about these things personally, but I know they can be the making or breaking of a career. She should have got the Oscar that year.
Yeah.
It's so obvious that, I mean, she wasn't even on the list. Of course she wasn't, because it's all about pushing for a nomination and things like that. But it's the best performance.
It's about enforcing the ideology of realism.
Yeah, and also it sort of proves his whole point.
It kind of
she doesn't appear on the the selection. Just completely proves his point.
Doesn't stop me feeling pretty bitter about it, to be perfectly honest, because she is amazing. In fact, all the performances in this are fantastic, but she is mesmerizing. She, like, when she does fear,
amazing.
She looks genuinely afraid.
And she does it in such interesting ways as well. I mean, that scene where all she does is just turns her eyes up and doesn't move and doesn't blink. It's a brilliant decision. It's a brilliant decision, because it instantly makes this ostensibly how old is she? 16? That's Laura Palmer. But this teenager into a child, in the shadow of this very threatening father figure. It's horrific. It's really frightening. I mean, one of the many scenes in this film that really I find very difficult to watch, because it's so
the dinner
intense.
table scene.
Yeah.
It's so intense.
It's worms in the stomach, isn't it?
It is.
But then that's what happy family dinner time looks to a hell of a lot of people. Looks like to a hell of a lot of people. It's just that their perspective doesn't get made into Christmas cards and Hallmark movies.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And even when it is made into a lot of like social realist fiction, it's almost apologized for.
Yes.
Yeah, and it doesn't really capture the horror of it, because it adheres to the ideology of realism.
Exactly that.
This refuses.
It is ideological. It is ideological. Yeah.
This refuses to do that. This, like all the best uncanny fiction, and I think this fits into that category. Even though, as I say, it completely blows apart those categories that I like to talk about. It shows you what it uses the irrational and the uncanny and the ostensibly illogical and unnatural and supernatural to show you what these things actually feel like to people.
Yeah.
My favorite analogy for walking through modernity is like the ice field, and it looks like a smooth, clear surface. It looks like you should just be able to walk forward forever, really. But at any moment, a crack will turn into a crevasse, and just out of nowhere, in a split second, you're just falling into nothingness. That's what living in the modern world actually feels like to millions upon millions, for most people, actually.
I think most people, at various points.
This sort of fiction gets at that far more. There's noble and worthy quote unquote realist fiction about things like abuse and so on and so forth, and some of it's great. But for me, this sort of text gets at the actual visceral feeling of it far more profoundly.
Yeah,
I mean, I
definitely.
would for a film that was so roundly despised, I would absolutely gun it for it as being one of the greatest films of all time, without question.
It's
one of the most fascinating texts of all cinema that I've seen, certainly.
To think that it's essentially a spin-off of a popular 1980s, early 1990s TV show.
Yeah.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. But sometimes
we're seeing the contours of our taste very clearly shown here, I think, because it's very it's clear that Hannibal is indebted to this.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes. Oh my goodness, yes.
It's also, I don't know if there's a question of indebtedness or influence, but this is a lot of the same stuff that's going on here is the same stuff that John Carpenter was talking about in the Mouth of Madness. Actually, you take out the more specific stuff about the stuff that's more trained on the experience of being an American woman in the second half of the 20th century. The Carpenter movie isn't particularly interested in that, but a lot of the more general stuff about living in a world made of signs and symbols.
Absolutely, yeah. It's all there. And again, Hannibal, definitely, especially when you get into that third season when everything becomes metaphysical and religious.
Yeah. I mean, for a film that they attempted to bury it. I've got to mix my metaphors now, but they it rerouted a lot of rivers, and I think it rerouted quite a few rivers in terms of pop culture influence on a certain strain of movie and television making, definitely.
It's funny, isn't it? A lot of the films we've spoken about in this series have had a very sort of similar trajectory. Ghostwatch was very much the same, of course, completely buried, but somehow remained in the collective subconscious. It was fondly remembered. And I think this is similar. The influence of it is still very profound.
It's what you could call stealth influence.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of the kind of influence that people that write for film magazines don't notice,
But I think one of the frustrating things, actually, it comes back to Jack mentioning earlier on about the Emperor's bollocks hanging out, is that what is sometimes very frustrating is that sometimes you run up against it taps into the thing we were talking about earlier about princesses and supermarkets. It's sometimes very frustrating that you want to, because there is a view that you like something like this precisely because it is, let's say, abstruse or willfully, and you're trying to say, no, that's not the reason.
That's not
that
it.
is not the reason. I'm not trying. It is not about trying to look.
Yes. And what's wrong with that?
Well, in a way, yes. I think what you're getting at, Ellie, is that
I think that it's a very easy libel. Right, yeah. It's a very easy libel that you're kind of. You just need something like this because it makes a statement about you, and the frustration is you can see exactly where that might come from as a libel. And it's like, it really isn't the case. If I could only just get across that this feels more real than any of these realist texts that we could mention. This feels so in touch with something. It's so profound. The feeling watching this movie, but so therefore, it's very easy for a fan of something like this is to almost be as viewed as much of a bollock naked emperor as the filmmaker, and it's but in a way actually maybe that has to happen because it links back to everything we talked about. If everyone was seeing it for the same reason, everything would be different and the film wouldn't exist.
Yeah, so, it's a fair point. It's a fair point. Yeah, it's that whole sort of philosophy book left conspicuously on the coffee table thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's that notion
it's
that
like, and on this occasion, you just want to say it's not that reason.
it's not that. No, it absolutely isn't that. And we're not being pretentious here. We're not like being deliberately contrarian and edgy and what. That's not the point. That really isn't the point. This is sincerely brilliant.
Yeah.
In a way that I find,
because if it was just an
difficult to
intellectual
articulate.
exercise, if it was a purely intellectual endeavor, it would be a shit film.
It would be a shit film.
Everything else going on, we're not dealing with a remote, calculated filmmaker. In many ways, David Lynch has got a wonderful naivety about the way he makes films, and that's why they come out so devastatingly real.
Yeah,
it's because he doesn't seem to notice that maybe he should put a filter here or a filter there. He just does it.
Or maybe he should sort of like punctuate this moment or insert a leavening agent here somewhere. He just goes for it, doesn't he? He feels the truth of what he's doing. And if he feels it, he does it.
And that means when something is visceral, it's very visceral. When something is cornball, it's very cornball.
Yeah.
When something is, a bit obnoxious, it's very obnoxious. And when something is extraordinary, it's very extraordinary. I mean, that's
a hard lesson to learn as a creator. Yeah. It really is, that lack of self-consciousness where you're not looking at what everyone else is doing and what everyone else is saying, and you're not reading reviews and think, oh, I do that, I'd better not do that anymore. You know?
Yeah.
Realizing that what you do is sincere.
Yeah.
And therefore has worth. It has meaning.
Yeah.
And just letting it go, letting it fly.
And notions of integrity, because integrity is something that is usually more likely to be, if you like, glued to the very realist things we're talking about, which do fall short. Whereas Lynch is the type of director, a type of artist who would be called a trickster, playful. But actually, this has enormous amounts of integrity.
Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, if we're talking about integrity, then I think this film is stark. I think it doesn't allow for the apologisms and diversions that so many other texts do, even when they're dealing with the same subject matter. It just doesn't allow itself that. It doesn't allow its audience to get away with it either.
No.
I mean, the scenes of violence, for one thing, which are almost universally against women. I mean, harrowing.
It's horrifying. The final murder is almost unwatchable. God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific.
And also the tragedy in that scene where Mike is trying to save Renette.
Yeah.
And he knows he can't save Laura.
It's impossible, yeah.
It's impossible. She is a unique vector in this.
It has to happen, right? It can't not happen.
Yeah, can't not happen. But he can save Renette. And that, and on top of all that extreme violence, that becomes even more devastating. It's like he's there, he can save someone, but only one of them.
Only one of them.
Oh, Yeah.
One of the things I love in this film is the little bit you get from Leland's perspective, Leland Palmer's perspective, where he's sitting in the section after the horrible over the dinner table scene that night. The section when he's in the bedroom and he starts to cry.
Yeah.
And he goes into Laura's room, and there is this the way Ray Wise plays it. It's completely sincere.
Yep.
It's completely sincere horror and remorse at his own behavior.
Mm-hmm.
But also, of course, Ray Wise. There's another wonderful thing he does where the scene where after the morning after Laura has realized who it is that's been at her since she was 12.
Mm-hmm.
And she's slumped over the dinner table, and then she goes up to her bedroom, and Leland follows her upstairs, and she just says to him, "Stay away from me." And he does this face, which is like, well, what do you mean?
What have I done?
It's utter bemused innocence. But the minute she's out of the room, the minute he thinks nobody is seeing, but is seeing what's happening, his face collapses into guilt and anger and I've been caught, etc., etc. And both Ray Wise is brilliant because all these reactions are equally genuine.
Yep.
and
I
that's,
think, yeah,
that
and it's
shows you that he is capable of absolute earnest honesty and sincerity at the same time as he knows that he's lying. He knows that he's pretending. He
It's
knows that he's covering
brilliant,
up.
isn't
And
it? It's that
it's
cognitive dissonance, right? Just wonderful.
Yeah. And it gets at this feature of guys like that and of patriarchy generally, which is that as long as the man knows that what he's doing is wrong, that's okay. That doesn't make it worse, which it actually does by any sort of sane moral evaluation. If you know that what you're doing is wrong, then you're more responsible. No, in this calculus, in this emotional calculus that men are taught to by patriarchy to indulge in, if you know that what you're doing is wrong, well, that's actually a sign that you're actually a good guy. Underneath it all, underneath the real guy, deep down, he's a good guy. He knows it's wrong, and so he gets to not only commit the abuse and the exploitation and the cruelty, but then he gets to feel bad about it.
He gets to apologize for it.
That's having the cake and eating it.
Yeah.
He gets to feel the genuine remorse and the genuine sorrow at what he did. Oh, I did such a terrible thing. Why do I feel this way? It's terrible that I feel this way. And that's not actual remorse, and it's certainly not redemption or anything like that. It's just another way of enjoying what you did. It's just another way of reassuring yourself that you're the good guy.
It's one of the pitfalls of Twin Peaks the series, because it does do that.
Yes, it does.
It does do that. But Leland has his redemptive moment at one point when the exorcism is performed, and
this doesn't give him that alibi. Doesn't allow him that alibi,
because it's very important to establish that is Leland at that point. It's not Bob. It's Leland having those reactions.
As I say, in this film, those sorts of distinctions just break down completely.
Yeah, because Bob is Leland is Bob, and Bob is something else, isn't it? He's a metaphor. He's a living metaphor.
Yeah, Bob is all men. Bob is patriarchy. Bob is that part of Leland that thinks that way and feels that way. He's that part of every man that thinks that way and feels that way. And because Laura sees him in herself, he's also that part of everybody that thinks that way and feels that way. He is the symbolic expression, at least in the little system of symbols and signs that are being shared erratically by this group of people in this place. He is the symbol of all of that, just that vampiric abuse and usage of each other.
Yeah, but I think there's one get out clause for the series. Just at that point you were talking about, George, is if there's a get out clause for that moment as being a little too neat, a little too much separation between Leland and Bob. He's in a room full of men who want to hear that.
Fair point. Yeah,
that's a scene which is played out only to men and men in authority, men who are representative of institutions that reinforce all of this anyway. And they want to hear that. They want to hear that it's someone else, and he was a good guy underneath it all. I mean, it's an imponderable. You can look at it through many lenses because it's Lynch.
It's Lynch, right?
But,
exactly.
I think there is an argument there that's like, well, he's saying it to a couple of cops and a lawyer, and
and to Coop, of course, who is this strangely naive idealist underneath his intelligence. He is almost like this very narrow parochial force of positivity, but
look what he says to the two brothers in the return. You both got hearts of gold. No, they don't.
No, they fucking don't. They're
gangsters.
They're
violent, misogynistic gangsters. But then a lot of that series, The Return, is about how Coop is not an ideal.
No, it's about
he is incredibly flawed.
Yeah,
and he is naive, and he is he misses whole things, and it is that naivety which, of course, leads to the tragedy of the whole thing.
Yeah, of course. I love the way the show does that, where it builds you up to want Coop. The Coop of Twin Peaks, and then it gives it you and then says,
it doesn't work now, does it?
Is it? Brilliance. Absolute brilliance.
Which is good, because we're also we're a long way
what
from
does Leland say? It's the oldest cry of this sort of bloke as he's murdering Laurie. He says, "Why are you making me do this?
Why are you making me do this?
Why are you making me do this?
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
So he gets to do it. and enjoy it, and then feel bad about the fact that he enjoyed it, and then feel good about the fact that he that he felt bad about the fact that he enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And Ray Wise, man.
Oh, he's so great. Yeah.
He's fantastic, isn't he? My God. He captures the duality.
He's another one of those people.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah. I was just going to say, he's another one of those people nobody else in the history of the world ever looked or sounded quite like him.
No.
You know, there are people every now and again like that.
He's very particular, isn't he? And again, that's something Lynch does beautifully when he selects his actors. People who look in a very, very particular way.
Oh,
Ray
he's another
looks
director
as
who's
though
very
he's on a fault
faces.
line. He looks as though he's on a fault line of being the good, respectable guy who is fucking demonic. So he's perfect. The fact that he can act it as well, just as the icing on the cake, could be. He certainly looks it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a band of eccentrics he had as his sort of backup alumni.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Of his rep company,
yeah. I mean, what a fascinating bunch.
Oh, with Catherine Coulson and the others, yeah.
Yeah, Gabrielle Zabriskie and all of them. They're a fascinating bunch.
It must have been fantastic. I can't even imagine, quite frankly.
I mean, he's in his way. He's the Roman carnival theatre manager, isn't he?
Yeah, in many, many, many respects.
With his band of eccentrics and oddballs and.
Well, there was a little featurette on the DVD I've got, and some of the actors were talking about the experience of filming Twin Peaks. The actor who plays Bob, Frank Silver, was talking about it, and he just said, well, I just did what I thought David wanted me to do, and that's it."
Yeah, and I love.
Someone should revive Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead and get him to play the player.
Yeah. Yeah, there's wonderful serendipity as well, because he was just basically a carpenter on the set.
Yeah,
and David was getting this idea about this spirit, this being. And it's like, I want him to look like and he saw him at the conversation. I want him to look like him. And Frank Silver said, "Well, I am an actor as well. The carpentry is like my day job." And he said, "Okay, we'll be in it." And then they had this wonderful moment of serendipity where. The editor rung David Lynch and said, "Oh, we've got a problem with a scene in episode 2 with Sarah Palmer speaking to Dale Cooper and the police about Laura." And he said, "What's that?" He said, "You've got someone in the mirror." He went, "Shit, I'm going to have to reshoot." And they looked and he went, "Oh, it's Frank Silver. Keep it in."
Ah, brilliant.
But him turning up in the mirror was before he'd been cast.
Brilliant! Oh my God! That serendipity I was talking about earlier. That right? That.
Yeah. And so Lynch was like looking at it, going, "Well, that's Frank. That's fine because I just cast Frank as Bob, and that can stay. We don't need to reshoot."
Fantastic.
And it's like, fantastic! How cool is that?
That is so cool. I love that to bits. I think that is wonderful.
I know,
absolutely wonderful.
What are the friggin' chances?
Right. It's the kind of thing
universe itself. Yeah. It is magic. He's rearranging symbols so much that he is actually changing the material universe.
And David Lynch
bending it to his will.
David Lynch said a wonderful thing, which was in an interview, and he said, "I think back at that moment and wonder, did I see him in the mirror first?" Just leaves it at that.
Awesome. It is the kind of thing that appeals to like the part of my mind that's prone to magical thinking. It makes me think there's some sort of god or principle of the cinema looking over these projects. Brilliance.
Fantastic stuff. Well,
guys,
that was a biggie.
That was a great cap to Spooktober, I've got to say.
Lovely stuff, and a slightly out of left field one as well, but I'm very glad we.
In its way, yeah, but I mean, it couldn't have come.
In some ways, a no-brainer,
really.
but at the same time,
I think people are going to be surprised by this one more than the others. But wow, I mean, those who haven't seen it, just please go and watch it.
And I just because we haven't mentioned, because we could have mentioned so many things, but
Yeah.
I just like, my God, Badalamenti. Oh my God, that score.
Mm.
That score
Oh,
is phenomenal. I mean, his work on the series was good, but this is on another
this
level.
is on a this is something else. It's beautiful.
I mean, it was the way I discovered as well Jimmy Scott. So thank you for that. I'd never heard Jimmy Scott until I saw this movie, and then it was like, oh my God, that's another thing. And the fact he sings a song in the movie called "The Sycamore Trees," and of course the sycamore trees become significant again in The Return.
Don't they just?
And it's like, I love it. It's just so all connects up, and yet doesn't connect up fully.
Yeah.
Which again brings us back to its intense reality. I say it is simple.
Doesn't make anything. It doesn't make anything so banal as sense.
No. We'd be lesser for it. It would be absolutely lesser for it, and I just love it for that. I love it. To have the balls.
And yet it can be incredibly. It's incredibly insightful, but it doesn't have the tyranny of sense.
Yeah, it's not didactic, is it?
No.
That's just beautiful stuff.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but does your life make sense? I mean, in the way that in the way that so many texts do.
No.
Do you have do you
we
have
said
the
this
rule
right
of
at the
threes?
top, it's
yes.
The amount of times where
you have subplots
you just have that
join up with the A plot. And
definitely not. No, I'm riding from day to day.
In fact, I had my sort of existential crisis because obviously we moved out of rehearsal into the actual show. Now we're doing the actual show, and there is nothing that underscores how, in a way, time works, or rather time doesn't work quite like that process. Because I always think to myself, it's like that you suddenly arrive at things in life and you don't know how you arrive at them. And this is something that Lynch grasps, and the way he makes narrative and the way he edits. And we were about to go on for our first night last week, and I said, we did all that work, all that build up, all that unpacking of text, all that setting things up and making sure now we're doing it. This is how I'm going to die, isn't it? I'm going to just suddenly be at the point of my death, and I'm going to be wondering how the hell I got there.
Yeah.
Time makes no sense, and Lynch really exemplifies that in material such as this. It's like you just suddenly arrive at these different plateaus, and the meaning of the journey between the different plateaus just absolutely breaks down or becomes fuzzy. You slip away from yourself, whoever that is anyway. I just remember I was minutes away from going on, literally delivering my opening line, and that was my thought of the night.
That was what was going on.
This is how my life's going to end, isn't it? It's just I'm suddenly going to arrive at it and think, what the fuck? How did I get here so fast? And it's like rehearsing and going into a show. It's like it seemed so far away to actually be having an audience, and then suddenly they were all there. It's like, oh, this is just too perfect a metaphor.
But I've always lived my life expecting reality to twitch aside like a theatre curtain at any given juncture. So Lynch is just the perfect
who uses
perfect
theatre
espresso.
curtains.
Yeah, right.
And then, of course, in The Return, I mean, I love the fact that in the White Lodge is basically this bijou cinema.
Yes, right. Lynch just expresses that existential anxiety. Well, it's not even anxiety; it's just it's an anticipation almost.
Yeah. And the thing about the intent, the power of those signs and symbols is it's also their eccentricity as well. I mean, the idea of because he establishes things like, the medium of travel for these spirits is electricity, which is a man-made thing, which is extraordinary. And there's a lot going on in that, actually. A man-made conduit for power becomes the method for these spirits. But also the idea That's how we move
symbols and signs around in our world. It's
exactly.
All that stuff that Neil Gaiman was doing in American Gods.
Yeah.
Well, it's done 10
Better
times
here.
more clever here
Yeah.
without the leaden didactic
Exactly.
one-to-one,
But it's the overhead fan I find one of the most fascinating symbols. The idea that it literally spreads evil overhead. It fires it off just through the act of revolving.
Yeah.
That's an incredible symbol in these, because of course, being set where it's set, the middle class homes of so many American houses have those fans, and it's just the angst, the torment, the horror of family life rises up like hot air, and that thing scatters it,
like dispersing it throughout.
Yeah, and
it's also
so
directly
terrifying.
compared to a clock as well. There's a lot of it. There's emphasis on clocks in Firewalk with Me. The school day. Where she's just sitting there allowing time to pass, and the clock is dissolving and reforming and blurring and so on. Time as a kind of tyranny.
Yeah. And still, I mean, I always remember the pilot, the 2-hour pilot of the first Twin Peaks, before they announce Laura Palmer's death at school over the intercom system. There's this random girl who runs through the courtyard screaming and crying, and you think, what's she screaming and crying about? Is that anything to do even with Laura Palmer? So he's also very, very good at just allowing other lives to introduce. So the narrative, the main narrative, never dominates fully. No. He allows for the fact that other narratives exist, and they are allowed to poke through, and they might even only poke through for a shot or a scene and disappear again. But nothing is ever, the value isn't removed from it.
That's what's so wonderful, isn't it? There's none of that writer's school stuff of like, oh, everything has to feed into the main plot, everything has to make sense or whatever. No, you don't need that. No. It's all part of the world that you're creating.
Yeah, incredible piece, and strangely, there's something strangely romantic about the fact that it was, like they tried to bury it in a sense.
Yeah,
and
but it is having a bit of a renaissance.
Incredible!
It is. I mean,
it's
well regarded,
like several of the things that we've talked about.
Yeah,
I think we've talked about several texts like this, haven't we? Where they're having their moment, or they're in the process of having their longer moment where they come back. This is true of Ghostwatch and Exorcist 3 Legion and,
In the Mouth of Madness, it was true of.
In Mouth of Madness,
Prince of Darkness.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. In many ways, I felt this about Mouth of Madness, but I think this applies to a lot of these. These are texts whose time has come. They've proved to be prescient.
Yeah, I think so. I think
frankly, so. That's the word. Yeah. Well, that was great.
Guys, on that note, wow. Before we go, anything you'd like to advertise, pimp out, etc.?
Well, all my stuff's sold out now, so there's no point with me. We have sold out.
He's playing fucking Sherlock Holmes. He's Sherlock Holmes on stage in the Hound of the Baskervilles at the moment.
Yeah, right.
That's what he's.
It's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
It's pretty damn cool.
And we did sell out, which is very good. And they've been nice about it, which is pleasing. We laughed about it as a cast because said actors are so fickle. If they say it's great and what you're doing is great, of course you think they're absolutely wonderful. And as soon as they say anything to the contrary, it's like, what the fuck they know? So it's the same people. You're allowed that prerogative, I think. But so I'm still doing that. Obviously not tonight. Tonight was my night off. But back to that tomorrow. But yes, thank you everyone who turned up. Had lovely full audiences and
brilliant.
They could have gone on longer. I think it's that the realization that there was quite a demand for it. But I think it's they've got a nice little niche there of doing these. Gothic inspired pieces, and I think the nice thing about this one has been that the surprise for the audience is getting a straight rendering of it as well. As I think I said before, for some reason on the stage, if not on screen, Sherlock Holmes has become something that just now gets parodied. It just gets sent up. It gets spoofed. It's always comedic, which I'm sure have their place, and maybe some of them are good. But this is absolutely done
straight down the line,
as it's meant to be. You know, it's the Doyle.
Good stuff.
This reminds me of something that I was quite astonished when I heard about. I remember somebody. You know, I don't follow the West End news, but somebody told me that there was quite a long running, quite a successful play based on Susan Hill's The Woman in Black, and I thought, oh, that's quite interesting. It's not actually a book I'm particularly fond of, but I was sort of interested in that idea. But I looked into it, and it's a comedy. It's sort of done as a comedy. Yeah, they've done it as a comedy. And they did that with 39 Steps as well, didn't they? This is the other thing. They did a sort of a stage version, not an adaptation of the novel, but an adaptation of the Hitchcock film. Right, and they've done it as Criterion. As a comedy, where they mock the original text. Like, what's the point of that?
Yeah, I'm always at a bit of a loss with, you know, it's the timidity of it. That's what it smacks of. It smacks of timidity, and also a bit of, aren't we terribly clever?
Oh, please, nobody think for a moment that we take this stuff seriously. Right, no, we hold it in just as much contempt as you do, honest.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly that. I'm trying to figure out how you would do The Woman in Black as draw any humor whatsoever.
I don't know.
From that.
I should say,
unless I hallucinate. Maybe I hallucinated.
We are getting laughs, but we're getting laughs because of the jokes Doyle put in.
yeah.
And said, you know, they're the ones that are meant to be there. But otherwise,
how bizarre!
And it's amazing because actually, you know, it's like
trying to do a comedy version of The Turn of the Screw or something.
Yeah.
It's like, what the fuck?
I know, it's such a well-known story, and everyone knows at least something about Hound of the Baskervilles.
Yeah.
And yet one of the joys of it is that people, I'm sure maybe something like 60% of the audience, 65, 70% of the audience come knowing who did it. But it's what the response does seem to be, that there is an appreciation for it just being done earnestly.
Yeah,
because it's so rare on the stage.
Oh God, honestly, this is a whole other podcast.
At the audience.
Yes,
you know, it is, and
and
actually, it's one of the things that you realise, because even as actors, you know, there were times like, okay, because we've got, you know, to do this, we've got to do that, and you know, we've got to, you know, and you realise actually the only way to do it is to go super earnest on those points, and the audience will come with you. And it's been astonishing. Things that I've even been a little bit, I wonder if we'll get away with this. You know, there's about 2 or 3 moments in the play I think, I wonder if we'll get away with this. And the audience are with you.
Yeah.
And then I think, oh God, why did you have so little faith?
Please,
God, give me earnest adaptations. Give me earnest adaptations of fairy tales and whatnot, please.
I think it's another thing that's time has come. It seems to me like the earnest Gothic or the serious Gothic is kind of having a bit of a comeback.
It is having a bit of a renaissance at the moment, isn't it? There is a movement for it, definitely. There's a long trail left by the likes of Disney's Aladdin. You know, Aladdin came along and was really popular and was this wisecracking sort of postmodern referential thing. And suddenly after that, you could not do earnest stories in children's media. It was impossible. Absolutely impossible.
Yeah, and the curse in the Gothic is absolutely Buffy the Bloody Vampire Slayer, which, you know, Joss Whedon is a curse upon the entire sort of world of fiction, television, film generally,
and a lot of women,
particularly, and a lot of women, clearly,
apparently so.
But particularly because of that show, that approach to the Gothic,
yeah.
Which is to reduce it, you know, it's to make it banal and material. To
just sort of say over and over and over again, I've heard of genre tropes.
Yeah.
You could say that the original Scream bears some responsibility there, but I think that's very much a case of people being influenced by something and then trying to copy it and then completely getting it wrong.
And
completely copying
misunderstanding it, of course.
Yes,
Yeah.
Misunderstanding
Because Scream-
what was going on with the original Scream.
Yeah, Scream is a genre-literate slasher horror, but it is still a slasher horror. It
That's
still
the brilliance
functions
of it. That's the
properly.
brilliance of it. Like, people who don't necessarily know horror inside out come to it and see a horror film. They don't see a comedy at all. Whereas people who are sort of invested in slasher films and horror, they come to it and see a black comedy.
It had enormous influence that's been largely negative, but it's not the text's fault because people didn't get what the text was doing. They saw things in it that they liked, and they thought, "Oh, we just do that.
We can just do that.
Do that over and over and over again and turn it up to 11, etc." No.
The irony of Scream is that Scream should have been the end of slasher films.
Scream does it, doesn't it?
The end.
But it's certainly all you need of the genre literate self-referential slasher film. You only need the one Scream that's finished, done.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You can just about
we don't
get
need
away.
any more metatextual slasher films. It's been done. We only needed one.
You can just about get away with like the second Scream film because it's a commentary on sequels to slasher films, you know. But even that is pushing
Never
it.
seen it.
It's all right. It's okay in the sense that it's doing for sequels to slasher films what Scream did for original slasher films. It kind of works, but after that it spirals out of all control and it becomes, it doesn't work after that. But wow, yeah. What were we talking about? What were we doing?
I think we were pimping our stuff.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
And I said I couldn't because it's already been
because it's on. It's going. Yeah.
And everyone's bought the tickets.
Do you have anything?
I'm on Blue Sky. I write at Eruditorium Press. I am writing more these days. I have a Patreon. $1 a month gets you access to everything, including extras and advanced things. And that's it.
Excellent. Links below, by the way, guys. Links below. As for myself, knocking about here on Exaggerated Elegy, lots of videos like this, lots of video game Let's Plays at the moment as well, because I haven't got time for anything else. You can find links to all of my published fiction over at strangeplaygrounds.com, or if you go to Amazon and type in George Daniel Lee, you'll find my author page with links to all of my published work. Most recently, had a short story published in the Kevin J. Kennedy publication, which is a collection of monster horror stories, so kaiju, effectively horror stories. I have a queer Lovecraftian kaiju story in that one. So that's lots of fun. If you go over to Arrow Films, you'll find the latest Hellraiser Blu-ray set, which my colleague and I, Kit Power, feature on the Hellbound disc. I'm plowing my way through my contributor's copy of that. That's a fucking brilliant Blu-ray set. All personal bias aside, even if I weren't on it, I this is like the best Hellraiser set ever. It's just so comprehensive. It's got everything on it. It's so good.
I have a specific thing to pimp. I forgot this. The new Outside In book has come out from ATB Publishing. Outside In publishes books where they like each book is an essay about every episode of something written by a different writer. They've done Doctor Who ones, classic and new. They've done X-Files. They've done Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And the latest one, they've sort of decided to do Doctor Who all over again. So the latest one is the classic Doctor Who, every story with a different writer. And I'm in that with an essay about one of the stories from the 1960s. So if you want to read something I wrote about classic Doctor Who, and the proceeds go to charity as well. So how can you possibly say no? Grand. If you listen, if you don't buy that book, you're a bad person. You hate children. If you don't buy that book, you hate children.
Guilt and shame. It's the way to do it. Yeah. Send me a link, Jack, and I'll put it in the comment bar below. And guys, thank you. I mean, this one was intimidating. I don't know about you, but I was a little bit intimidated about talking about this one. But no, I think we got there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like I've earned my bread this time around because I'm still kind of bummed out for just having watched it, and I don't feel like I've even begun scratching the surface. I
don't think it's possible. I mean, this. it's bonkers. And I think we've got to come back at some point and do the follow-up conversation. We've got to do Twin Peaks: The Return.
It's just 18 hours
I need to go on and watch
through.
the bloody thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's only 18 hours to get through, Jack. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think after this, for the time being, we're returning to Hannibal.
Yay.
Brilliant.
Yeah, can do. Yeah. I thought we were going to do Halloween before we went back to.
Oh yes, I mean I'm up for that. If
we
you
don't
guys
have
want
to.
do, no, I'm
We
totally.
can table that for next Spooktober or whatever you like.
I am so up for that. I mean Halloween. I mean it would be a nice cap. That would be a nice cap, wouldn't it? Because it is. Well, the name says it all, really. And since it has been a Carpenter season, more or less.
Yeah, he's definitely been a returning figure.
He's featured quite a lot this time around, so I think Halloween would be great.
Would this be the third film with Carpenter?
Yep. Yeah, I think so. So should we do that?
Sweet.
If you like.
Excellent.
I don't mind either way, but
Halloween next then, yeah? Brilliant.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks so much, guys.
Tender
Thank
boughs
you
of
for listening,
innocence
guys.
burn first.
Yeah, this is going to be happening probably quite a lot in these videos for a little while. You're going to get Twin Peaks quotes. Sorry, it's just going to happen. And thank you.
I can't think of one.
I did mine when I read the poem. That's it. I can recite the poem. I'm not doing it anymore. And thank you guys for listening. Until next time, bye bye.
Take care.
Good night.